Welcome to All Politics of Local America's number one political hip hop radio talk
Hey
show.
Ed, I can only see the top of your head.
You tell me that every week, man. So,
Hi man, how are you?
welcome to All Politics of Local America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. Y'all know if it's Friday, y'all know it's time for All Politics of Local. So tonight we have a special guest with us. We're going to delve into some history, and we're going to talk a little bit about the 1960s civil rights movement with an incredible icon who is still in our midst. So we're going to talk with Gwen Moten as soon as she clicks back in, and then of course, John, what you got coming up at 6:30?
Well, at 6:30 we have Dr. Kelly Harris, Larry Hamm, talking about the rise of hate in January 6th. There are going to be some students from Seton Hall who are going to join us for the conversation. At 7 o'clock, we have Phyllis Jeffers-Colly talking about her new book, We Got Soul, We Can Heal, Overcoming Racial Trauma Through Leadership, Community, and Resilience. That'll be perfectly timed because we're talking about a lot of trauma in this first hour. So Dr. Phyllis Jeffers-Colly will help us with get to that next level with some healing of racial trauma. At 7:30, we're going to be having a conversation with Councilman William, or a candidate for West Orange Council, and that will be Mike Barbee.
What time is that?
That's 7:30.
Okay.
For that West Orange council race. At 7:45, we have Ron Pierce from the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice coming on with Philip Hensley and the League of Women Voters, and they'll be talking about pushback against a new bill that will put police officers at election polls, right? So more back in terms of what we're doing for the future to deal with stuff in democracy. And at 8:15, we have DJ Rhino in the State of Hip Hop. We'll have Hakeem Green here tonight, who will be substituting for DJ Rhino, who is DJing in DC right now at the Congressional Black Caucus. So we are so happy that he is here, that he's coming tonight as well. So we're going to start off, with an icon that Ed talked about, Miss Gwen Moten, who is who was there, right, at the 16th Street bombing 59 years ago, and was almost came close to being a martyr for the movement, and is going to talk to us about a lot of that history and things that have happened since. Man, Ed, do you want to give Miss Moten, your volume? Is it working? Is it good? Oh no, we can't hear you.
Wow. What could be wrong, John?
You're on your computer. Your volume is down. I'm 100% sure that's what it is, because your mic is not picking up on us. I can hear Ed. We can't hear you. And if you look at the mic, if you look at the volume, you need to make sure the volume is all the way up for the mic. And the second thing would be to look at the mute functions on your own computer to see if those are working as well.
Right.
You're actually muted right now. So I'm unmuting. You're actually muted on this, so you can unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. You're actually muted. I can see it. You're actually now you're unmuted. Say something. Okay, I can't hear you, but that's because it's not in the program. It is with your own computer and the volume on your computer. So it's not the program, it's the volume on your computer. So there should be something on your computer where you could literally just control the volume on your computer and turn that up. Right now, I think it's all the way on the. Right now, I think that your volume is very low. Hi, we have Chairman Hamm of the People's Organization for Progress. I really thought that you would really love this segment, Chairman Hamm, because of you are a historian. You love the historic nature of what we're doing. It is so we have you here. We just can't hear you, Ms. Moten. So, Larry, can you chime in? Can we hear you?
Testing.
Yes, we can
hear you.
I'm here.
Can you hear me?
So, Ms. Moten, it is your computer. It is not your connection. if you go to the volume setting on your computer and your volume setting is all the way up, then I would go to the the only thing I can think of is that, right? Like, have, in terms of the volume setting on your own computer, that is off because you went out and you came back in. Can you hear other things on your computer? Like, if, in other words, if you play music, can you hear it? And normally we would do this off the air, but you were such an important guest. We want to get this right because you are like, we are honored to have you. You know that. We want to have you on here, and we're just like a little bit away with this volume thing of getting you on the show. And okay, so now we heard something. All right, we're hearing something. We're not hearing you. As I don't think we're hearing you. All right, so the volume's up, but we can't hear you. And I do not know. I have no idea what it would be. Often it is because, and Baba Zaid is here. Everybody wants to hear from you. Oh, I know everybody's just sad right now. We're just sad right now. We're all sad. We're all really, really sad. Now, can you join via your phone? Can you join on your phone? Because maybe if you join on your phone, it might not have those issues.
Yeah, working out.
So do you want me to, are you able to get access to this from your phone? Just go to your email and whatever.
It's in her text. So if she just click on it from her text, she should be able to get on.
Oh, perfect. If you click on it from your text, that might work, and you could join from your phone, and we would take you out of the this. And that would be awesome. So for everyone who is listening, we have Miss Gwen Moten on, who is a person who basically survived the 16th Street bombings, the bombings that really pushed the civil rights movement in a different direction, right? Like the people who were there, right? Like, I think we take for granted. So if you just, oh wait, I think you're here, but it says device not connected. So you're in, but you're not connected for some reason.
We can't hear it. She's muted.
Well, you're not. I see you, but you're not connected. Is there a way that you're not online, or are you on your Yeah, it's not allowing us to.
Does she need to disconnect from a computer?
No, she should be able to do both. I don't know what it says. It says your device is not connected. One last thing. This is like everything is going wrong, right? Like most of the time, you could just jump in through the other phone, right? Is there anyone there with you? Are you there? Oh, someone always could help out.
That's what we got kids around.
Right. Because the young people would know exactly what it is, and they'd be like, "Here, this is all you have to do," and click one button, and it would be solved, right? All right. One last thing you're trying on your cell phone, but it says device not connected. You hit the link, and then it went up.
Seems that she can hear us.
She can hear us? We can't hear her.
She can hear us
at all. Right. And if we can't, and since we can't hear her, we think that is something about the mic on her computer. It's down, right? For some reason, the mic on her computer is down.
Showing that she's muted.
You what?
It's showing now that she's muted. It wasn't showing that before.
All right. Can you unmute yourself? Right now you're unmuted. Okay, good. Say something. No, we can't hear you. So so one last thing, and that's on the phone. Oh, this is so terrible. When you put it up, what does it say?
She can't tell you.
Or just like put it to the screen so we can just see it.
She was trying to do that.
We can't. Oh, okay.
You're backstage, rather than blocked.
And you are,
your mic and
right?
camera.
But I can't. but it says device not connected.
Yeah, her browser. Sometimes I went through this when I first started with y'all, and I forgot what to do. But there's something with the browser. It's a browser.
You should use Chrome. If your browser is Chrome, put it on Chrome, and it might work. If your browser is Safari, it might not. If it's something other than Chrome, it might not. Try Google Chrome as your browser. And if you try Google Chrome as your browser, it might be able to go through.
And that's probably what it was back then. I just couldn't remember.
So Safari doesn't work, John?
Depends. I've had mixed results with it. And there's another one that might not. But
I'm actually on Safari.
You said what?
I'm actually on Safari. I'm on my work computer.
Okay, so you have a Mac on Safari. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it doesn't work depending on what the settings are. And on here, there's something about the settings. And it might even be like a protection type setting that's not functioning with it, right? Like, so it could be anything that's on the computer that's not functioning with it. Ms. Moten, can you exit your phone, exit the browser on your phone, just close it, open up Safari,
you can,
and then try to put the link in there. I'm going to put the
while she's doing that, you're tuned into All Politics of Local America's number one hip hop talk and radio show. We're getting ready to have a powerful discussion with one of our community elders, Gwen Moten, on the important story of the 16th Avenue Baptist Church and why that story is so important to us now.
Yeah,
being joined by an area struggle legend in the Demo Chunga, Lawrence Hamm, and our founding co-hosts Edward Riley and Jonathan Austin. We're really looking forward to this engagement.
By the way, do y'all know Miss Moten?
We do. Her daughter is the administrator for our CCRB.
Oh
wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we've got a long way to go.
You never put on, Zaid.
Well, they have to get they have their own regulations and whatnot, and she's quite modest. She's quite modest about that. And they had Rick Robinson is their spokesperson, so she likes to defer those things to Rick.
So the only thing that I was going to ask is, can you hear me? Like, can you play music on and you can hear the music?
Oh, this is so unfair.
I know. You're right here, and it's like we want to have you on, and we tried the phone too, man, because we're like, if one doesn't work, the other will. But this is one of those things where everything's going wrong, and everything's going wrong.
I'm wondering if I called her, John. How would that work?
Well, we would be able to at least hear her. So call her up and see.
Okay, I'm gonna mute my phone.
That might work. That might actually work. That would work actually. That'd work perfectly. It would just sound like, one of those dub movies where the lips are out of sync, maybe a little bit. But I think it would work. I think it would work well. Ed, great solution, man. Great solution to the problem.
Yeah, all politics local. That's right. Ed Riley and Jonathan Austin put it together right there. Live.
But I think that would work perfectly, because then at least somebody has the volume, and you could speak in your phone. So yeah, he could call you up, speak in your phone. Your picture's there, your phone is there. It all works, because I think your phone will be able to do both at the same time. So can you hear Ed? Ed, can you hear her?
Yes.
So we can hear you on your phone now, ma'am.
All right, can we hear Ed? Can we hear you?
Talking to your phone, Miss Moten. We can hear you on your phone.
Yes.
Yes. All right. We did. All right.
There we go.
Okay. So
do this. Y'all need to learn about that, because that's jazz and not hip hop.
Okay. Right. So Ed, ask some great questions. Let's get this started.
So I think the thing is that, I I had a preliminary conversation with Miss Moten, and I wanted to try and limit that conversation that she and I had offline, so that she could take us back to that day in 1963 and tell us exactly what happened. Because one of the things is that, like you said, Jonathan, she could have been part of that history and been the fifth young lady in that church. So if you could, Miss Moten, take us back to that day and tell us what happened.
Certainly. Let me start a little bit before that. Now, it was in Birmingham, Alabama, that Dr. King was the most segregated city in the United States. So you can imagine.
Oh, Lord, she just went out. Ah! Can y'all hear, or is it just me?
Ed,
No, we can't.
Ed, you
I can't.
muted yourself. Ed, take yourself off mute. Ed, you muted yourself.
My fault.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Go ahead and start again, Ms. Moten. We apologize.
Yes.
That's okay. I was going to take you a little bit back to the scene of the crime, so to speak. We're in Birmingham, Alabama, where Dr. Martin Luther King said it was the most segregated city in the United States. And Jim Crow was alive and well. I'm growing up, as other little Black girls and boys are growing up, in a city where much was not available to us on the outside, but in our communities, everything was wonderful. Our schools, our churches, our social organizations. And I grew up with my best friend, whose name was Denise. We grew up together, and we were so close that we were kind of separated by our teachers, because they said you can't be that close. But strangely enough, after being separated a little while, her mother brought Denise to my house on Saturday evening, September the 14th. And we began to play and renew our friendships. And Denise's mother asked my mother if I could go to church with her. And for some strange reason, my mother said no. And of course, we were a little upset, but we didn't, at that time, we don't talk back to our parents. We just said, okay. And we continued to play. And the next morning, the last thing I said to Denise is, I'll see you later. The next morning, we were in our church, and we were in Sunday school, and we heard this awful sound, this big booming sound, but no one said anything. You see, we knew what it was. Birmingham had been the place for bombings of Black churches, Black homes, Black businesses. And no one in my church said anything, because we knew, but we just didn't know where the bombing had taken place. And as Sunday went on, I was sitting in church service, a voice whispered in my ear that said, Denise is dead. In my right ear, there was a touch on my shoulder and a voice, oddly enough. And then we learned that Denise and 3 other little girls were killed. And we often think about the fact that as Denise's guest, I would have been there with her, prepping for church in the bathroom. But if it had not been for the intervention of my mother saying, no, you can't go to church for no reason, because we were old friends, but saying, no, you can't go to church with her, I was not there in the church. My family had participated in the movement meetings and the marches, and my brothers and sisters were in jail. They were jailed with all the other youth that had marched. But I wasn't able to go. I had been at 16th Street Baptist Church many times, but for some reason I was not there. And by the grace of God, I'm here to tell the story.
And we should, for everybody's benefit, that Denise is Denise McNair. Denise is one of the 4, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robinson, and Addie Mae Collins.
Yes.
Those are the 4 we lost. We have a friend, Ms. Moten, and we want you to know that Addie Mae's sister is a good friend of the People's Organization for Progress. We had her in Newark several years ago, and she's got a narrative. She's got a book out now that she's doing quite well with. So I wanted to
Yes.
acknowledge our own connection. Dima, you may want to lift that up some more.
Yes. I'm very much aware, and I didn't know she was there until after she had left, and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to speak with her.
Yes, I didn't. We did not know you had that background. We certainly would have made that connection long ago. So if you will, man, take us back now to how the community had to handle that horrible event, how they had to react, how they managed it, and how you came through it. That's a lot to manage.
Well, it's a devastation that never goes away. Not only individually with me, with the community. I can say, for example, it wasn't until I was an adult in Newark that I was ever able to say to someone, "I'll see you later." And I didn't know that until I realized I was teaching at the Newark Boys Chorus School, and I was telling them the story, showing them the movie Eyes on the Prize, and I realized, I said, I can't say goodbye to someone or I'll see you later, because as a child, it stayed in me that if I said that, something would happen to that person. So individually, it stayed with me. In the community, there were so many young people affected by it in many ways. Let's say, for example, many of those that went to jail, it was a badge of honor to go to jail, but it was also shameful. Because in the South, you never wanted to end up in jail. It was an embarrassment to your parents. But that shame, that shame stayed with many of them until they got older and really accepted the fact that it was a great thing that they did. I know a lot would not talk about it. A lot would not say that they were beaten or that they were hosed or that the dogs approached them. It was, I guess, a fear or just a shame that stayed with them. Of course, the community took a long time to overcome that kind of tragedy. And I might mention, as a lot of people may not know, not only were the 4 girls killed, there were 2 boys killed outside the church, one by a policeman and one by a group of white boys that same Sunday. So there were 6 children whose lives were taken on Sunday, September 15th, 1963. And how could the community overcome? It was very difficult. And of course, let's say for Dr. King, he was talked about greatly. The ministers didn't want him there anymore. The white community obviously didn't want him more. They were blaming him for that. Those murders, because they said the children shouldn't have never marched. But I'll share with you, the children had to march. Reverend Bevel, who had led a children march in Mississippi, had encouraged them because he knew that the movement of young, energetic bodies, fearless bodies would help make a change. And also, many parents, older adults, would not march because of the fear. They were threatened. If they had marched and their families had participated in marches, they would lose their jobs, their homes would be taken away, their cars. And I know this for a fact because it was said to my father. And I know in attending the movement meetings as we did at night, you had the FBI and everybody outside of the churches where we met taking license plates. No one knew why they did that or what would happen to those persons who owned those cars. So there was a great deal of fear by the adults. So the youth had to march. And then after the marching and then all of them being piled into the jails, it was an awful feeling everywhere. But there was always determination by a group of people to just keep going, just keep marching. Many of the teachers would, who turned their backs to pretend that the children weren't leaving the schools as they marched. Many of the teachers were supporters and the principals, but of course they couldn't speak out. And now some of their children who are now in jail after the marching, the particular time when so many went to jail, several thousand, they were just afraid. We were all afraid. And we, of course, stayed in our communities. But what a lot of people don't know, even in staying in our communities, our parents, our fathers in particular, protected us in our communities. I remember wondering, where was my father going at night? And he, along with other men, would patrol our communities with weapons.
Mm-hmm.
At the
I hope folks heard you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at the crossroads, they wouldn't allow anyone in. And as a child, I didn't know why he had to leave. But yes, there was you didn't know what the repercussions would be. Would the Ku Klux Klan's rally and get even stronger to kill us? We didn't know. But we held firm, and the marches continued even after Dr. King was in jail. We continued to march. So there was fear in the community, but there was a strong faith that we would overcome.
Go tell it on the mountain.
I think that
for the background, Ms. Moten is referring to the Great Children's Crusade March of May 2nd and May 3rd, 1963, when legions of Black children bravely and boldly, engaged in civil disobedience with the intent on getting arrested as a part of that particular tactical mode to embarrass the government for being up and upholding its racist segregation order. And the wave of that enthusiastic protest made that church the target for what ultimately happened to it. So that's background I wanted to share too. And I think it's also important to appreciate that there was a place for nonviolence and there was a place for folks to protect themselves. You just heard Ms. Moten talk about her father, part of an armed patrol protecting their community when they needed to do that. So our folks went through a lot and never accepted the order of segregation, no matter how harsh it was or how the mythology is put on us. I just wanted to lift that up, Ms. Moten. This is I was on this story earlier.
Ms. Moten, could I ask you a couple of questions? One, how old were you when the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed?
I was 11.
11 years old.
This was the youngest, and we were in the same grade. We were same age. I think one of our birthdays came afterwards, but that was our 11th year.
Mm-hmm.
Or 12, going into 12, yes.
And were your parents active in the civil rights movement? Your mother and father?
Yes, they took us to the movement meetings. That was the activity. And as I mentioned, my father couldn't do too much because he was a teacher. He would lose his job. But he was also designated at the Pilgrim Baptist Church to escort Dr. King around. He picked him up, and he carried around to different places. So I wish I could have heard the conversations they had. But so he was active. And on Monday nights, my sister and brother, we were at the meetings to witness that energy, to witness his message, to witness the testimony.
Miss Moten, was your family was your family a member of the church of the 16th Street Baptist Church?
No. My father was a member of New Pilgrim, which was one of the churches where the movement meetings met. The other part of my family was at another church. It was Payne Chapel AME Church. And there were several, it wasn't just the 16th Street. There were several churches highly involved in the movement and held the movement rallies. But 16th Street, I guess, was the center point, especially when the young people were being trained. They were trained to withstand blows. They were trained to understand what might happen to them. And much of that training took place at the 16th Street Baptist Church. But there were other churches involved, and my family was a part of several other churches.
And this is my last question for the moment. when the church was bombed and the 4 girls were killed, and there were other people that were seriously wounded, like Addie Mae's sister, Sarah, lost sight in both eyes.
Yeah.
She regained it in one eye. But I wanted to ask you this. I read that when the funeral was held, that 3 of the girls were funeralized together, but the family of one of the girls did not want their daughter to be funeralized with the rest. Can you verify that or debunk it if it's a myth?
I can verify the fact that 3 girls' funeral all were held, yes, together, because I was there. I was called an honorary.
You were there. You were there when they were buried. You
Yes.
would, I mean, funeralized the funeral.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
I was there.
Dr. King preached the eulogy, right?
Yes, yes. I was called an honorary pallbearer. I was there in my little white dress, my little white socks, and black patent leather shoes, and I recall all this crying and wailing. Yes, I was there. I can't say why the other. One person told me that they had planned their child's funeral before the other 3's funeral had been planned. I don't know the reason, but I can share with you. Yes, I was there, and I remember, and I was a pallbearer, a child pallbearer, and I do recall what happened as a little child during that funeral service.
I only raised that because when you spoke earlier about Dr. King, you said some of the preachers didn't want King in Birmingham and wanted him to leave after he got there. I had read that the one family that didn't have their daughter funeralized with the rest blamed Dr. King for her murder. I don't know if you could speak to that or not.
No, I don't know that. But I can share with you, yes, there was opposition mostly because many did not want children involved. You see, there were generations of people being killed and coming up missing or having to leave the South because they were threatened. Even my father's father in Selma, Alabama, because he was a strong Black man and would not betray his people because they wanted him to be a tattletale. His life was threatened. He had to leave Selma. So there are a lot of people who knew the history and understood the history. And for someone, I'm saying this because I understand why some people would not participate or didn't want their children to participate, because we knew those 4 little girls weren't the first children killed in Birmingham, Alabama, or the South. Children were missing, adults were missing. So yes, some parents, I do understand, would not have wanted their children to participate because for fear of their lives or fear of the lives of the relatives. Remember, I said Birmingham was, I didn't say this, but Birmingham was known as Birmingham.
Yes.
Yes, that's because so many places, Black places, were bombed. So if you retaliated in any way, not only could your home be bombed, Dr. King's his brother's home was bombed. You could be bombed and, of course, murdered, and it would never get into papers. No one would know about it because you have to remember the KKK controlled and so much. There were KK members in the police, the fire department. They owned the newspaper. They ran the Board of Education. So these things would happen, as I know happened all over the South and the United States, that people became missing simply because they objected or they participated in something that was against the white establishment. So to answer your question, I can truly believe and know that some parents would have been upset if their children participated and angry with Dr. King and the others, Dr. Fred Shuttlesworth, who was the civil rights. Yes, whom I didn't know. He was a leader in the South. So as far as my understanding and acceptance is that, yes, I would understand why they did that. Why they would not support Dr. King.
Dr. Harris, do you have a question?
Yes, I wanted to follow up with what Larry was asking. Good evening, Mrs. Moten. So it's my understanding, so Condoleezza Rice and Angela Davis were both in Birmingham at that time. I think Angela Davis had a younger sister, and her family attended that church. And Condoleezza Rice, from what I understand, her father was a pastor but didn't get involved in the movement. Do you know if that's correct or not?
I simply know that Condoleezza's father was a minister of, I think it was Presbyterian Church. And church, which actually was across the street from Denise's mother's house. I don't know of them being involved in the movement at all. I only knew of her after she became well known. I don't know, and I'm not saying she didn't, but I've never heard of that. I actually would attend her father's church for Girl Scout meetings.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yes, but I don't remember. In fact, someone would ask me often, "Don't you know her?" I said, "No, I did not know her." And one day in a vision, I saw her as a little child. I could see, my mind went back and I could see her as a little scared little child. And this is no reflection on her, but this is what I saw, a frightened little child. But I do not know of them participating in any way.
Now, Ms. Moten, can you speak to how she has gone around the country and actually had folks believe that she actually knew the young girls who were murdered in that bombing?
I cannot attest to that, but I will share with you this. Birmingham is a spread out city, wide city. You can be in one community and not know anyone in the other 4 or 5 communities, 6 or 7 communities, because it was spread out. She was not living in the community that those girls were in. They were in different communities. The other thing is that at that time, and probably now, as little children, you don't hang. They were older. They were 3 and 4 years older. The little ones like my age, and Condoleezza was younger than I. We don't hang out with them. They don't want to be with the little ones. So the older ones would not have been with the younger ones. So I don't know in what instance she would have known them. So I cannot attest to that, but I don't think that was. I wouldn't imagine where she would have known, and they didn't go to the same church with her. So I don't know if all of that was true or not.
And unfortunately, they are no longer with us, so they can't verify or deny that. So she's comfortable in telling people that story, that she knew those 4 little girls who were bombed. And that has greatly got her publicity at the same time from our people.
Yes. So I was teased. I have a one-woman show called From Birmingham to Botswana, and it covers the civil rights, what you're talking about. And it goes,
how do we not know that?
Yes, and I've talked to a lot of colleges and schools. In fact, a festival will be produced next weekend in my honor in all places in Florida, talking about what I have done from that childhood up to today, because I became a U.S. cultural representative under Bill Clinton. But my point is that I started telling this story called Birmingham to Botswana, and people would constantly ask me, "Did she know you? Did you know her?" And I would tell them no, but some of the same predictions that I personally went out in my talks have come up in her lectures and her talks. And as everyone said, "Did you tell her that?" And I said, "No." So I don't know if she heard something and then she believed it true for her, That's what I was asked.
Wow.
Did she hear what you had to say and then she repeated? I don't know, but I can simply say I didn't know her. I know people who know her. I have a play brother, Dr. Robowski, who was the president of the University of Maryland. He said he knew her, but I didn't know her. So I don't know if her stories are accurate or maybe she heard some things. I cannot attest to that.
Vicky, go ahead, Jonathan. I want to lift up Vicky when you get a minute because she's making some. She's sharing similar experiences in her childhood.
Oh no, you can do that.
Vicky Donaldson has been chiming in on the show, Ms. Moten, and she also went through some of the freedom workshops where children were trained in those protests, and she's bearing witness also to how people were made missing, is how we used to refer to that years ago. And Hamm Church was really one of the only safe places in many instances where children could gather and communities could gather. So she's bearing witness from her own experience. And I didn't know that Vicky had that training when she was that young. And we do need to get y'all together. Yes, Vicky, we hear you. We hear you and we see you, my queen. Yes.
Okay. Well, not only the church, I do want to point out that we had our own communities, our own. Now, this is very important. In the South, you had your own businesses. It was in your isolated area. Mm-hmm. You had your own theaters, you had your movie theaters, you had your own stores, clothing stores. Because if we were allowed to go into the stores, you couldn't try on the clothes, by the way. Right. You could buy it, but you couldn't try them on. So we had much of what we needed, but we were not a part of the whole community. I remember my father took us, when the circus or the fair came to town, we couldn't attend, but my father took us to a circus that came to town. And my sister tells me he paid the same fare as all the other patrons, the whites and all. But when we walked into the tent, we were told we had to sit on the ground on a tarp. And my father scooped us up immediately and took us to a black-owned movie. So he led us out of that situation because we had somewhere to go, but it was in a black area.
Ms. Moten, I'd like to ask you, first of all, I want to say, I was in the Birmingham, the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham in 1987 with Reverend Ben Chavis. And we were given a tour at that time. And I believe the person who gave us the tour of the church was Deborah McNair's father. Do you know if he's still alive? Is he still alive?
And it didn't make that. No, he died maybe 3 years ago. But I can share with you, I knew because we were close. I knew Mr. McNair very well. The reason Denise's mother came to my house with Denise the night before she was killed was because the father had taken a photograph of me. I was in a little musical at school, and they were bringing that photograph. The oddity of it, why then, it had been a long time, and why that night, the night before she was killed, and they lived a distance, why did they bring the photograph that the father had taken of me? I think it was whatever I was to do, I was to remember and tell the story because she was there with me. And Mr. McNair, some years ago, I was interviewed by the Star Ledger in New Jersey, and the story was printed, and the Star Ledger called Mr. McNair and to validate my story. And he said, yes, Gwen was Denise's best friend, and all those things she said was true. So I did know Mr. McNair, who passed probably two, maybe 3 years ago.
And let me ask you this. The bombing must have been traumatic for the whole community. Tell us how did the community react in the aftermath of the bombing? Yes. And were the people who carried the bombing out, were they convicted, and how did the community react to that?
I can tell you, outside of the church, I'm told there was a riot of Black people, and they had to calm them down. There was an immediate action on that Sunday. And of course, the police stepped in to stop it. People were angry. They were ready to bear arms. I don't know who quieted them down. I don't know. And I'd assume it would be Dr. Shulsworth and Dr. King who kept them at bay from turning Birmingham into a powder keg. But they did. So there was not a riot, an overall riot over the city, but there was immediate reaction afterwards. So that I do remember. I don't know what else may have happened. I'll tell you something. And I say this because I was talking at Rutgers University in Newark, and I was telling the story. It was an evening class of adults, and I was telling the story, Birmingham to Botswana. And I got to this part at the wake. I was at Denise's grandmother's house at the wake, and I was sitting by myself. And then there was this knock on the door, and when those opened the door, there was Dr. King, there was his brother A.D., which, you know, by the way, died mysteriously.
Just recently. Yes.
No, a while back. He was
he died in the swimming pool. He died in the pool,
Yeah.
right?
But he was an excellent swimmer.
Right.
Right.
Always been suspicious.
Yeah, there were marks on his neck when he had his underwear on. So at any rate, we know what happened. So there was Dr. King, his brother, Fred Shuttlesworth, and Andy Young at the door. And I was telling the story because here's this little girl sitting by herself. The parents in the kitchen, at a wake. The wakes were at homes. Then the adult opened the door, and there he was, Reverend King, Dr. King. And as a little child, of course, I was in awe of him because we called him the Black Moses. And there was the Black Moses. And he looked into my eyes. And when I told this story at Rutgers, one of the students who was an adult he said, Miss Moten, I know that story. And I said, you know that story? She said, yes. Dr. King, in a documentary or an interview, told that story of coming to the wake and seeing this little girl and saying something to the effect that when he looked into this little girl's eyes, when he looked into her eyes, he knew he had to continue. He knew even beyond all the threats and all the hatred that had been expelled upon him from parents, from the whites, everyone. So I'm saying that maybe part of the reason I didn't go to that church, maybe it was necessary for him to know to continue that movement through the eyes of this little girl. And maybe I didn't, and maybe I continue to live because I've been able to do this all over the world, talk to people all over the world and show that you can be a little Black girl in Birmingham, Alabama, in a hated city, and then you can then be a representative for the United States, for the president. So the aftermath of that for me was to continue. The after that for the city was a lot of hate and anger that had to be squelled, that had to be controlled, but it was. And now Birmingham is a booming city. So whatever happened afterwards, hopefully people have learned and moved forward. It doesn't look like they've learned in reference to all the murders that are going on, but hopefully that there was some kind of a foresight in some people knowing that it wouldn't last always.
Now, Ms. Moten, let me ask you a question. Were you at the March on Washington? Were your family there?
No, I did not. I think I was on tour. I began to perform internationally. So I think I was on tour. I toured with Belafonte for a while. And I think
wow.
Yeah. So no, I went back in when there was an anniversary to Washington with Harry, but I wasn't at the original.
Do you still?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Ed.
Only not one-to-one. Only recently, well, a few years ago, he was brought to Newark. We brought him for our program, Singing Praise of King, our Martin Luther King program. Yes. So we brought him to Newark, and that's the last time. I think that's the last time I spoke with him, because he was very complimentary to the mayor about me. But I've been with some of the fellow artists who have worked with him.
Ed, you should know that Harry Belafonte was a survivor and somebody who was also at the 72 Gary Convention, and he's somebody we got to really figure out how to get on tape for our oral history project.
Yeah, Ms. Moten, I have a question for you. A lot of times when I teach young people, and a lot of people within this generation say that we've gone from slavery to the Jim Crow to the prison industrial complex. And they say that all of the struggle, just like whiteness and white supremacy, just changes shape and form, but it's still there, and progress has not been made. They say that often these fights are futile, these changes in policy, the civil right, like changing the laws, all of that was for nothing, right? Like they go like the civil rights acts get used against Black people, that the laws, like we're still killed by the police. We have fewer Black businesses now than we did then. And they have a very bleak, they have a very bleak outlook when it comes to progress and what we should do. As someone who lived the movement from the time you were a child, what do you think of their pessimism? And what do you think, like, what would you say to them if they're saying we went from slavery to Jim Crow to the prison industrial complex, and things not only have not changed, they will not change, and the politics that we do will not make a difference?
It's very difficult. Because I certainly understand and agree that it seems that things don't change. What I do protest against the fact that we don't teach our young children. You're sharing this history with your audience, but how many others do? How many are so afraid to even talk to their children and tell them the history?
Indeed.
And take them to the, if only we have museums, take them to the Civil Rights Museum. We're faltering because as adults, we kind of expect them to believe what we believe. And they don't. They can't believe what we believe. And they're going to believe what others tell them. And the prominent ones that will tell them are that everything's all right, or everything's all right, or even negative, that there's no future. It's up to us, the older ones, to take them by the hand. And I know you say you can't take these smart children by the hand, but we've got to do something. They need to be led and told. They need to be led in the right direction and told our history. And yes, it appears that the history is not changing, but what is the alternative? To just let it forget our history? Forget what has happened and just let the changes, the things reoccur? No, we have to keep, I so admire Larry Hamm. We have to keep going. We have to keep moving with the belief that even if it's 10 of us that are marching, somebody's going to learn from that. So to answer your question, yes, it seems like it's not changing, but we can't give up. And we as adults, we must somehow get our children to understand that history will repeat itself if we don't do something about it.
Indeed.
Ms. Moten.
You were, and just want to follow up on that, right? On that same thought. You described for us a situation where kids just go up missing. Birmingham was bombing him. That, like, it was a state of like terror to speak up about rights. Do you think that when they say that we've gone from slavery to Jim Crow to the prison industrial complex, do you think they understood what it was like to be you as a kid and to live in Birmingham there? Do you think that when they say that not having lived realities that were far, far different than now?
I say, reiterating what I just said, is that no, they don't really know. They have not lived. They don't really know. And I say that it's up to us to teach them, to keep it up front, to keep the history up front. They can't experience, let's say, for example, I took my great-grandmother, would take her to the doctor's office downtown Birmingham. She would have to be there around 6 a.m. to sign up on a sheet of paper, doctor, who would not read the paper until all their white patients had been seen. So, an elderly woman, and there were no bathrooms, by the way. So for a great-grandchild as myself, to have to sit there with my great-grandmother for 12, 13 hours, these young people have not experienced that. And we don't want them to experience that, but we need to take them as close as possible to that history. We need to let them know that it wasn't a game, it wasn't pleasant. So to answer your question, no, I don't think they really know, because they can't experience all those things. They can't experience having a gun put in their face, because of Jim Crow, or even because of apartheid. I was in South Africa doing apartheid, and crossing the border, here are these white guys with rifles to my window. So they can't, you have to live it to really know what it is, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't fight for it.
Yes, ma'am.
They should understand this world, and those have a lot of hate for us. And it hasn't changed, and some of it won't change, but it doesn't mean we can't fight to make it better.
Wow. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, let me ask you this. And just to follow up on that very profound wisdom you just gave us, how did you, as a child of the segregated South, right, under that terror, how did you react to looking at the January 6th attack on the Capitol? How did that strike you?
I just saw, it was so ironic that white folks turned against these, just turned against what they thought was the best country in the world. I just thought it was so ironic that they're now trying to destroy what they thought was wonderful. I didn't have any total conclusions about that, other than I saw the hatred. I said, if that's the same kind of hatred they had on us for 400 years. So I don't have a total conclusion about that, other than these are the same kind of people who will turn on us in a minute. But now they've turned on their own. Who might just not think the way they think, but they've turned on their own. So that was my conclusion of that. And when you see, I mean, it's brother against brother, almost kind of thing. When you see that, I don't know who wins.
Ms. Moten, how did your family, how did the adults, when you were younger, what did they say about Malcolm X during that time? And how did your views on Malcolm X change at all when you, as you got older?
I think I was a little radical thinker. That was a person I admired as much as I could. And I say as much as I could because in the South, you only saw so much. You've got to remember, much of real history was kept away from us. Of course, they weren't in the books. And the news broadcasts didn't show everything, and always was one-sided. My parents would talk about the news, and we'd have a discussion and give their opinion. I think mostly in the South, they didn't understand what Malcolm X was. Many, not everyone, many didn't understand. And we were taught that this was the bad person. This was the wrong person leading us down the wrong way. Well, I didn't. I did. And my parents didn't tell me that my thinking was wrong. So I was able to grow up respecting Malcolm, respecting what he was teaching, but only learning later that he was doing so much for our people, because all of that was hidden. The breakfast programs, the school programs, all of that was hidden from us in the South. So for me, I was just a little radical thinker and believed in him, believed what he was saying, understood what he was saying, but we didn't get the whole story. So there was many who did not understand what he was saying and what he was about, because it was distorted. Everything was distorted. So yes, as I grew up, I became a stronger belief in the Black Power movement, everything. So that was just me. That was just me, because I guess there's something in me that knew that this was a great man. Malcolm was a great man.
Sister Moten, let me ask you real quick, because I know time is running out. The bombing was a benchmark historical event. Some historians say that had it not been for the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 wouldn't have been passed. What does the city of Birmingham do, if anything, today to memorialize and remember that event and remember those who were killed and those who were injured and its connection to the civil rights movement? I know when I was there in '87, the only thing I saw was the plaque that they had, the metal plaque that was attached to the wall of the church that had the 4 girls' pictures engraved in the metal. And what do they do anything on an annual basis to commemorate, to memorialize what happened?
Yes, I can share with you what I've been told, because I'm not there during these moments. There are annual memorial programs, services. You have the Civil Rights Movement, Civil Rights Museum there. Very extensive. Yes, there are constant, and in fact, they gave, when on September the 15th, a couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of programming over the city in remembrance of it. So yes, they do acknowledge, from my understanding, and in fact, I saw it on the news, what they were doing. So they do acknowledge it, and that's a good thing, I can say. I think there's still breakfasts and things like that where people come together and talk about it. But to my understanding, there is acknowledgement. Now, to answer whether it's enough, Larry, whether everyone is getting involved, I don't know. But I can say they are acknowledging it. And Birmingham has changed a great deal. I can't say if it's the best that it could be. That stigma will always be with it, what happened there. But there have been efforts to make changes.
I know that we are getting ready to be at the end of this really enlightening hour. Honored, as always. We are very honored, as I said at the beginning, honored to have you here. And Ed, thanks for the fix, man, because the phone, like,
I cannot figure out why we didn't know that. Well, did you know this?
Yes.
You did. I mean, Miss Moten, did you know her history like this?
Oh, did I know? No,
Yeah,
I didn't know her involvement. I didn't know her. No,
right.
No.
We absolutely would have been lifting that up.
So I do.
Before you go, I do want to share this. Larry, you didn't know it, and a lot of people don't know it, unfortunately, because I lecture all the time. But Larry, guess what?
What?
I don't get invited to Black schools, predominantly Black schools.
Man, oh man.
Wow.
Don't start. Don't start. Because we
Wow.
gonna open up another hour.
No,
It's gonna be
boy.
another hour.
But that means
We
that
gonna
just means
jump on that one.
that just means wait. That just means we have to have you back. That means we're definitely going to have you back. But we are going to ask you one last question as well. We are a hip hop streaming show. We love the connection between politics and culture. I know it might be a random question, right? But if you listen to hip hop at all, who is your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group? And if you don't have one, anyone who you think is related to in any way represents the spirit of what you believe is hip hop?
I wish I could answer that, but I don't know. The only thing I can say, if it's a young person, if they talk about culture, they talk about movement forward as people of color, they've got my vote. So if you've got a hip hop artist talking about how we can make it right as a body of people, I'm there. I'll listen to it anytime.
Because I like that in terms of just, this is what music is supposed to be, as a daughter of the civil rights movement, where the soundtrack was real. So thank you so much. Honored to have you. And you put us on notice that we have to have you back. And we'll have to have you back quite a bit, right? That just to talk about the history some more, to make sure that you are in those places and to be in conversations about education and school.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I would love to return. And I said what I said, hoping that people will understand. If I have a story about the history, my children need to hear about it. So if you have connections, I would love to share my story.
Absolutely.
I'm in Florida talking with a lot of people, mostly white. Again, I want to talk to my people, my children. So invite me anywhere you care to.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna tell all my friends at HBCUs who teaching to bring you to their schools, and we're gonna get you over to Seton Hall too. Come speak to our Black students at Seton Hall.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Again, this is All Politics Are Local.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're
Thank
honored.
you.
Honored
Thank
to have you. Honored.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And this is All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show, and we were so honored to have her there, and perfectly timed, right? Like, I know that our next guest is a writer and the co-owner of Diasporic Soul, and is a cultural worker, a writer, an intellectual, a healer, right? Someone who believes that Black people need healing. Right? Black people need to deal with trauma. Black people need to, we need to come together in love and community. And there are techniques she has for how we can deal with the trauma of the racial trauma that has been with us since we've been here. And we could not be more perfectly timed than right now. We just finished hearing about, from Miss Gwen Moten about the 16th Street Church bombings, how that affected the entire community forever, right? Like how that levels of trauma, people disappearing, having like racial terror, and that racial terror just has taken forms over time. Like Larry Hamm, Baba Zaid, both have, like, in their activism, have been, accosted, hurt, right? Beaten, right? Like by police, right? Like have actually experienced trauma from white people, from Black people. Larry Hamm has an incredible biography coming out that really does detail like the movement has sacrificed. Ed has been through some things, right? Like Kelly Harris has been through some things just even growing up and giving us to the place we are right now. So,
but nowhere near what we just heard, though, right? And I'm telling you, John, that I need to hear from this sister right now, because I'm mad as hell, brother.
Well, I'm just saying, right.
Knowing, just having heard that Black woman, right, that elderly, tell us about her great grandmother, right, having to go to a doctor's appointment and wait, right, until all of those white people were served. And then we can best believe that they did not give her the best care, right? And just knowing that. And I'm telling you, man, as an educated brother sitting here, you know, and I feel helpless, man, because I feel like, we look at damage we do to each other as people. There's no way, and I'm not gonna cuss because the sister's here, but there's no way that we should be doing what we do to each other after hearing that sister tell us what she just told us.
And even knowing that this trauma is not in the past but exist in present generations as well, of of just people living, right, who get substandard care, as we heard about in COVID, who get stopped, beaten, killed by the police, right, and have our lives be used with impunity. So welcome, Phyllis Jeffers-Colly, to All Politics Are Local. Can you first tell us something about diasporic soul? Like, what is diasporic soul? What brought you to this project that was like, Black people, we need to be healed?
Diasporic Soul is an organization that my husband Eddie and I started in 2016. I really didn't know exactly what it was going to be. I had working doing an entrepreneurship program in Cincinnati for women, and initially I imagined it to be study abroad. We mentioned HBCUs. I was at a small story public HBCU in Ohio, which allows y'all to kind of hone in on exactly what I'm talking about. And I saw what public policy was doing to our students, particularly our students who were from communities that were under-resourced. My career has been focused on primarily Black students who are Pell eligible, low income. That's where my passion as a teacher and an administrator happened to be. But I left that institution because even at HBCUs, the way that white supremacy and anti-Blackness plays out in public policy can be deleterious and can be wounding. So my husband and I had gone to Senegal in 2015. The day before we left, we were sitting in a pizza parlor with our nieces and nephews in Dakar, and the Charleston massacre came across the ticker tape. And within a year, we decided that we should move and begin to create space in Senegal where folks could fundamentally have a pilgrimage to the continent, whether folks have, ancestry specific DNA data that tells them they're from Senegal or not. We do know that most of us came to West Africa as African Americans. So wanting to hold space for that pilgrimage. So we started Diasporic Soul. And what we do is we offer heritage and healing experiences for Black folks exclusively, only. And primarily in Senegal. Our primary program is in Senegal, but we also offer retreats and workshops here in the United States. And when we say culture and contemplative practices, we're talking about the pilgrimage itself, the visit home to Senegal, to the continent. We're talking about the rituals that are traditional in Senegal, and you may have seen in other places on the continent, other places in the diaspora. We're talking about Gwen Moten and this idea of centering the elder and allowing her to sit freely, to speak and tell stories about her life and her history that have bearing on us. And we're talking about being in community in a way that often we don't get to be here in the States. And as an educator, our primary audience has been folks in higher ed and students. So my interest in the trauma piece has particularly been around where are our young people, where are college age young people in this experience with white supremacy, anti-Black racism, and how do we hold space for them to heal, as well as their elders and other members of the community.
real interesting because it's like you have a space outside of the United States,
Yes,
right?
sir.
In Senegal, where basically Black people can go. Well, why create that space? Because I'm going to ask you a lot about your book, but this is real interesting. Why create that space? Why the space in Senegal? Is there a reason why you sought a place outside of the United States for healing?
Yeah. Because in Senegal, and there are other places, obviously in the diaspora where this could happen, right? But there's something powerful. It's like what I write about in the book. I went to an HBCU in the 90s. I started in North Carolina Central University in 1989, graduated in 1993. And like Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about in his work when he names Howard as the Mecca, it's like you're infused with Black culture and cultures from across the diaspora. And there's something very powerful about that experience. So coming to Senegal or being someplace where there is a space where Blackness is it's just omnipresent. You know, when Samaya, who grew up in Richmond, who's at a Jesuit institution in Cincinnati, comes and she walks away saying, I didn't know I was beautiful until I went to Senegal. Or Maya, who says, I didn't realize how creative we were, how much capacity we have until I went to Senegal. It's like one of the first things we do is take people to do a water ritual because we know the genetic material of our ancestors is still in the Atlantic Ocean. And these young people and the folks that we have there, they're in awe of the ritual itself, like to actually stop and be attentive to the grief and all that's connected to that process. But they're also in awe of what it means because you all, many of us come from this narrative that Black people don't swim. And you're standing on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean and it's full of fishing boats, full of Black men and Black folks swimming. It's such a powerful thing to see yourself reflected back to you in such a constant and consistent and concentrated way that we do not get here in the United States. Even when we're in our churches, in our mosques, in our historically Black colleges, in our community and rec centers, in our neighborhoods, it's still not the same. And there's something spiritual about it's less tangible, less unseen. There's something spiritually moving and provocative about going home.
When you're talking about the place where it is, right? Like, and when they get there, and you're talking about home, break us down with the book, right? When you are talking about healing from trauma, and you are literally saying, here are techniques, here are things we need to be able to deal with trauma. Can you talk to us about some of the things that you write about so that can be helpful? And we're going to be putting your book up in a moment.
Okay. My primary assertion in the text is that Black cultures, using the plurality of the diaspora, understanding that soul is this transformative healing resource that reflects the sensibilities of the African diaspora. That's Sharon Harrell's thinking about when we use the term soul. That's what we're speaking to. And so when we say, well, what do you mean by the cultural sensibilities of the African diaspora? And I heard the reaction to what Ms. Moten, Mama Moten, Tata Gwen named for us as an elder. Some of our trauma is tied to how we perceive ourselves and the shame that we carry and the inability to see ourselves wholly, fully, in the context of this notion of like people are now saying, well, some of us have been saying this for a long time. We're not minorities. We're part of this global majority. So to be able to see culture in a particular way can be healing and restorative for folks. When I talk about the young people that I've served and the other Black Americans that have come to us, what you notice is they tilt their head left, they tilt their head right, and they see themselves differently. And for those of us who have been sort of see ourselves as African-centered or see ourselves as Pan-Africanists, or who went to NCCU for undergrad or A&T for undergrad, and then went and got a PhD in Africana Studies at Howard in 1998, we might find this to be like elementary, my dear. But for many of us, being able to look at ourselves wholly and celebrate ourselves culturally is part of what heals. And the other big piece for me in the text is the way in which those culture, specifically things like ritual and being open to spirit, particularly the ancestral piece. Like I spend a lot of time massaging this idea, this belief that part of our healing comes from recognizing our ancestors and doing work not only for us, for our trauma and our hurt and our racial wounds, but for theirs. And I also talk about the way that yoga, specifically restorative yoga, building on the thinking of Gail Parker, who's written extensively about restorative yoga, and the way in which our grind and hustle culture, high effort coping, John Henryism, sojournerism, part of our healing comes in our capacity to slow down and be still. And on a physiological level, in being able to recalibrate and rebalance the nervous system. Like when we talk about trauma, this work is it's not simply intellectual. It's not just understanding Sheikh Anta Diop or Malcolm X or Fannie Lou Hamer. It's a spiritual effort. It's psychological. You have to bring your body into the conversation. So all of that is part of the work that we do and sort of what I speak to in the book. And there's a lot of autobiographical or memoir to contextualize what it is that I'm saying in the text.
And I know we have many activists, and well, everybody on the screen is dedicated their life to Black people and made some significant sacrifices for the community. I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about Chairman Lawrence Hamm. I'm talking about Baba Zaid. I'm talking about Dr. Kelly Harris. All of them at various parts, right? Whether it be New Jersey, Philadelphia, Chicago, have done certain things, lived certain ways, where they've been very involved in helping others deal with the brutal reality of white supremacy and racism within their lives. And what advice, well, first, what questions do you have for her, not for the community as a whole? What advice would you have for you? Right? So Larry, I'm saying, ask her some questions for you. Baba, ask her some questions for you.
I could be all night long with this queen. Right. Let me say this, Queen. And by way of introduction, I want to say to you that I'm an IFA practitioner, right? In fact, my last divination told me to lean on Orisha Mama Olukun. Of course, with the ocean comes the trauma of the Middle Passage. My ancestors' resistance to the Middle Passage. So I want you to take a couple minutes more and expand more on the ritual dimensions of what you do, particularly what you were referring to with going to the water, because it's hugely important.
Okay. So I'm not an IFA practitioner. I am intuiting into much of what it is that I know to do. And my partner, my husband, Eddie, is Senegalese. And so much of what we do in relationship to Mommy Water is indicative of those two factors.
Now tell folks what Mommy Water is, because everybody don't know. You're dealing with who don't know what that is now. It's a teachable moment.
Yes, sir. So Mommy Water is the goddess of the ocean. So, and we know her through a myriad of traditions, right? We know her through Santeria. We know her. I was introduced to her when I read Ejus Dantika, who's a Haitian American writer, and introduced her to me as Liz Serene. So, Mommy Water is the quintessential mother archetype in Christianity, particularly in Catholicism. It's Jesus' mama, Mary. That's the way that you function and see the world. And it's understood that and there's a whole lot, I could do a whole hour on Mommy Water. So Mommy Water she is the nurturer. But as a nurturer and a mom, she will also destroy. She will also fight on behalf of her children. And we understand that level of power that she has, the power to restore us. Melodoma Somé talks about Western cultures being fire, and we need fire to move, right? It's the combustion engine, but fire destroys. And it's water that Somé offers us that allows us to restore ourselves, to heal ourselves. And it's part of our spiritual history, it's part of our spiritual practice. When we say wade in the water, that's just not this Christian phenomenon. That is our understanding of the power of water to clear us and cleanse us and bring us back to a place of balance and equilibrium. So when we go see Mommy Water, we do a couple things. We say thank you for being a part of the spiritual process that brought us back to the motherland, that brought us back to West Africa. I learned very early on from my husband to give her gifts. So we give her milk, we give her flowers, we give her fruit, we give her pastries, and we ask her permission to enter. Right? You don't just show up and do what we do in some cultures, which is just do what we want to do without any kind of permission or respect. So we honor and respect her. That's the major part of what we do when folks get there. Now, water itself, as a clearing agent, as a healing resource, we do other things with water. We do sacred baths. I don't want to. I think, Baba, you understand what I'm saying when I say that. I don't want to go too far into that. So there is the ocean ritual, Mommy Water. There is the water ritual and the water practices with healers, or what we might call shamans, what we call in Senegal marabouts. And there's also, another iteration of the ocean ritual when we go to the door of no return. And we also close.
That's what I wanted to. That's what I wanted you to get to. There you go. Keep going.
So again, what you name very clearly is when you stand in that door, we're not simply naming a narrative of lament. We're acknowledging that, again, that DNA, that ancestral material or matter still exists in the ocean. And we advise each of our guests to bring a offering to Goree Island, to leave at that door, and or to give to Mommy Water in that particular context. Understanding that Goree reflects our capacity to be resilient, not overcome all the time, but just simply that we have overcome, will continue to overcome, and that we did resist. And so all of that is playing out.
People said all that blood in the Atlantic wasn't all ours. Right?
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Right. That's right.
So we cut some people. Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, Kelly, I want you to lift up your question. Professor Harris has put in the chat the recent epigenetic study that was put out in Cobra as we make this push for reparations that shows how how trauma is intergenerational, how trauma can be passed down, how trauma is something historical, right? As opposed to just something personal and immediate, the way white folks trying to keep it because they don't want to admit to their crimes. Kelly, jump in. Stop being so modest.
Oh well, Barbee, you raised it for me. I just wanted to know what she thought, what the sister thought of epigenetics, and that's basically it.
I acknowledge the fact that ancestral and intergenerational trauma exists. And in the work that we do, and part of what I name in the book is, again, when we decide to look at our ancestral lineage, we stop and pay attention to the Gwen Motens and the big daddies in our lives. There's some healing that's going on, not just for us sitting and hearing the story or responding to the need, but there's something restorative for them. Like for me, let me be more specific. In chapter 2, I focus on racial trauma and stress. And I use my father's narrative coming from Guilford County, North Carolina, and name what it looked like for him. I grew up ashamed of my father. You understand me? Because we didn't always have enough, quote unquote. I didn't understand at 13 and 16 during my rebellious adolescence that he was a superstar, that he had made a way out of no way. And oh, he's here. I got my daddy right here. But I didn't appreciate that at 16. Because I was in this environment where this is what I was supposed to have. I was supposed to have these Nikes. I was supposed to have this thing and that thing and this other thing. So part of the healing was for me to go and tell my dad, yo, my bad. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't see you. I'm sorry I couldn't respect you. Because white supremacy and anti-Blackness and classism and consumerism and capitalism, all these other things that are tied to our oppression and our pain, I had to say I'm sorry to my dad. And I say to folks in our retreats, I'm like, who do you need to apologize to? And who do you need to ask for forgiveness from? Because in all this trauma, we keep, like somebody said at the beginning of this conversation, we keep wounding each other. Mm-hmm. And there's a movement, right? There's the work we have to do in community, out on the streets. There's institutions to be dismantled. There's institutions to be built. There's institutions to hold accountable. But you better get your family straight. Your grandma is 80. She's 90. Have you sat and listened to her? Because part of the value of what Gwen Moten offered us is that she got to tell her story. And what did she say at the end? She said,
her grandchildren. That's what she's saying.
She said, I just want to tell my story. Mm-hmm. And we're not holding enough space for our elders to tell their story, to validate them. Because part of what white supremacy has done is it invalidates what we know. And what you get when you sit down at the communal plate of chebu jen or jollof rice, depending on which West African country you're in at the time.
Jollof rice with some fish, you know.
No, you want the chebu jen, brother. You want the chebu jen. The Senegalese going to tell you the real rice. That's the real jollof rice, bro.
Chef Hamm is one of my favorite chefs, straight out of Senegal.
But it's what we get when we sit with the chebu jen is we get what Gwen is asking us.
Yes, ma'am. That's right. That's right.
And there's something healing about sitting at the communal plate, whether it's a metaphor or not, or it's a metaphor and literally we're going to sit down and eat this jollof rice, this chebu jen, this yassa, this paella, whatever we're going to eat together, we're going to eat together and actually look into each other's eyes, right. Actually listen to what it is our elders have to say and what our hearts have to say. Because the cultural sensibilities that Harrell is talking about, I'm talking about, we're going to work out from the heart. Because what the West taught us to do is put the head first and declare everything we know to be true, to be factual, and we forget about the spirit and the intuition, and that, some Baba said, the divination.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right.
Your coward shell. You gotta connect with the divine to heal.
Ashe. Yes, ma'am. Nadima, you haven't said anything. What say you?
Well, sometimes you gotta listen. I'm listening. You dealing with a subject I'm scared to touch.
I was asking, right? Like Larry, I was asking that, right? Because
I'm scared to touch it. But
Yeah, he is scared.
I'll ask a little question, because you know what's interesting
I've
is
been on the
how
battlefield with this brother over 40 years. He's been on the battlefield for 50 years. He ain't scared.
well,
I mean, sometimes, the bullets on the outside are easy. The ones that you have to deal with the consequences of all that struggle, that's always always takes a little bit more thought. There's always a little bit more difficult. And jumped out. Oh no. Donna jumped in. Hey, Donna.
Hey, hey,
Boogie.
hi, everyone.
Hey.
What happened to the queen?
There she comes. She back. She back. So let me ask this question.
Let her get back up so she can hear you, because she's not fully on yet.
Oh, can she hear me?
Can you hear us?
Okay.
Yes, she is. There you go. There you go.
The question I'm gonna ask is not the one I really want to ask, but I'll ask this one anyway. In your experience, have you found any differences because you spoke about the diaspora, have you found any similarities and differences between the spirituality that African Americans embrace and the spirituality that Africans on the continent embrace?
Yes. Shall I say more? Yes. I'm going to go back to ritual and practice. So part of what I'm speaking to when I speak about soul is, what is our practice? What do we do in response to what life brings us? So one example would be death. So we know that in our communities here in the United States, death was a communal experience, right? So was birth. I grew up in the 70s. I grew up Catholic, but there was always, I'm the oldest of the 5. So for every child that was born, there were dishes brought to the house so that my mom and father would be able to focus on the newborn child and the other children in the house. So in Senegal, what I see, what I've experienced, is the communal nature of the grief process, of the mourning process. So my husband and I lost 3 people this year. A cousin, who's the elder man in the family, and 2 close friends of his, along with one of my best friends from Port Arthur, Texas. So what I've seen is this extensive communal engagement around the grief process, something that we historically have done. There's a disconnect for a lot of us now. It depends on how you were raised, where you were raised, what your particular leanings happen to be. But outside of community, many of us don't do those things anymore. Where there is a convergence, and literally there is a convergence immediately at the time that somebody's lost, but there's also these sequential moments in which the deceased and the family are centered. So just before I came to the States this fall, we celebrated Eddie, my husband's father. He's been gone since 2008, 2006. And we made a sacrifice to the community. We made a sacrifice. We honored him at our ancestral altar. We made his favorite dish. We made that as an offering or a sacrifice. And in Senegal, there's this blending between what is African, what is tied to the specific ethnic groups. And there are ethnic groups, and we can't collapse the ethnic groups, and we can't collapse the country, right? But there is this sense that I must give something to get something. That I must honor my ancestor over and over and over again.
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
We used to do this, right? We used to do this on All Saints Day. We used to go to cemeteries, and I'm just maybe 3 blocks from the cemeteries where my maternal line, some of those folks are buried. We used to go in there and clean the graves. We used to go in there and clean the graveyard. We used to go in there and picnic. So there is a connection. Some of the connection has been lost in the white supremacist narrative that says what is African is wrong. We have to remember that Islam and Christianity were used to colonize the continent. And so both would have us reject that which were our traditional and indigenous practices. Whether we're African, Indigenous American, whatever our blending is, there are these indigenous practices that we know. And some we don't really realize. When we say, take me to the river, Leon Bridges makes a song about take me to the river. But Sweet Honey and Rock was telling us to go wade in the water 30, 40 years ago, a cappella. And somebody before that was singing the same song. We've always known that water is healing. That goes back to who we were on the continent. We've always known that. So yes, that's the longer answer. Yes, there are intersections and places where our practices overlap. If we're open to it, if we're open to spirit.
I have a question. I know we are coming in on time, but Donna, question. Do you have a question?
No, I'm listening and I'm catching up because I'm late, so I'm just listening right now. But I'll jump in when I have a question.
Or I was gonna say you jump in right when we're about to move to the next segment. So I was just jumping in a little early.
Course.
But,
that was a cautionary example. That's right.
but the question I have is really one that's very similar to the one I asked of our honored last guest. And you talk about healing, you talk about trauma, and you talk about the ways past it. There are many who argue on similar lines that the focus on politics, the focus on change, because we've gone from slavery to Jim Crow to the prison industrial complex, because we are still getting killed, right, with impunity, because there is a pessimism, right, about getting involved in political struggle. And they would even say that getting involved in political struggle is traumatic in and of itself. It is a trauma that, like, to engage in the process to try to change what will not be changed is trauma in and of itself. What do you say to that? Like, what do you say to that when you are concerned with healing? Should we give up politics, go someplace else, just go to Senegal, be gone with it, like just leave, or not get involved in certain ways? Because getting involved, trying to make political change, trying to change laws, those things just don't work, haven't worked, right? Like, so continuing to do more of the same that hasn't worked is crazy. It'll actually just lead to more trauma. It is traumatic in and of itself.
2 thoughts, 2 offerings, 2 responses to that. So resistance is healing. Like the Black liberation struggle is resistance, and there's healing in that, because part of our trauma is tied to institutions and systems that have to be dismantled and replaced. So let me be very clear, this healing thing, it ain't no individual endeavor. You must sit down at the plate. You must sit down with other people and eat the chebujin. Better yet, go to the farm, pick the eggplant, pull the rice, learn how to make it with a whole bunch of other women in the kitchen or other people in the kitchen and eat it together. This thing is communal and resistance is a part of that. I also want to offer and caution that this generation of activists are trying to bring the two together. Like, we can do restorative yoga on Sunday night after we've been taken on a bridge in Atlanta, and we can do restorative yoga and march. We can do restorative yoga and protest. We can do rituals that honor our ancestors. Like, we're at a place where the political has to sort of include the spiritual, and it always has. We just left the 16th Street Baptist Church.
Come on, that's right. Make it plain. Make it plain.
So for some of us, we ain't going back to the 16th Street Baptist Church. Some of us ain't never been in the 16th Street Baptist Church. Hail Mary, I grew up Catholic. However, it doesn't mean I don't respect that part of our practice. I don't respect that part of our culture. What it means is, my God, my divine ones, my ancestors show up for me somewhere else. They show up for me at the river. They show up for me at the ocean. They show up for me at my ancestral altar at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm burning incense and calling on them to intercede on my behalf. Like, this generation of movement makers and change makers, I think what I see is they want to weave it together. But resistance is healing. This is not an individual endeavor. It's not an either or. It's what I tell my kids and the young people that come to me, people that sit with me in the house in Sebi Kutan. It's both and. And we have to be comfortable with that ambiguity. It's not either or. It's not black and white. It's real ambiguous, but they coexist. Resistance is part of our healing. Because when you don't fight back, you feel worse.
That's right.
You feel powerless. So you have to stand up, or you've given all your power away. You've given all your agency away. You've given all that fire in your belly away. You got to do something with that.
So it seems like what you're saying, that it's not either or, it's and.
Mm-hmm.
It's all of it.
That's right.
You want to go take on an institution, you want to dismantle something, you better take your ancestors with you.
So really so it seems like the analysis that would say engaging is traumatic is missing the spiritual piece.
No, engaging is traumatic, because you are looking in the face of white supremacy, anti-black racism, gentrification, displacement, hunger. It will mess you up. It is, as you engage, as you confront, as you resist, you need a larger practice around that activity, around action, around agency, around your liberation. Your liberation practice, and not just activism. Your liberation practice has to have a spiritual element in it. That's what I'm saying.
When it's saying, because it's traumatic, don't engage, that would be, it's the reason why don't engage only makes sense is if it's not combined with the spiritual practice, because you need both, because you have to resist, but you also have to have the spiritual component to withstand what happens. And what you're saying is the resistance is also the solution. The resistance is both traumatic, but resistance plus spirituality also gives engaged ways to have that solution. So the resistance is necessary for the solution to happen, if the solution also is a spiritual solution.
Resistance is healing. Every time we show up and we ask the conversation to shift, every time we try to center Blackness or celebrate soul, we're engaged in resistance. There has to be sort of this expanded notion of what resistance is. We're going to always experience trauma. We're going to always experience stress. The question is, what practices do you put in place in your life, in the community to support one another, so that as we engage in confrontation is just one type of resistance. Making the decision to pursue African spirituality is another form of resistance, because we're bumping up against these narratives and these expectations that we've been subjected to all our lives. So what I'm saying is resistance is a continuum of resistance. And if we're going to be whole and healthy and continue to confront, we have to have other aspects to the practice, including the spirituality piece, including the physical activity, including the emotional well-being. All of that goes together. It's like we couldn't just have the Black Panthers and not have the Black arts movement. They coexist.
That's right.
They coexist.
Black arts movement, the spiritual sister of the Black liberation movement. That's what we should say. That's right.
Yeah. You have to,
That's
you
right.
have to have both.
No the basis of that. That's right.
And if we read We Got Soul, right? Like, let's bring it back to, you know, why we are here. If we look at this, the book, if we look at We Got Soul, we can heal overcoming racial trauma through leadership, community, and resilience. Is this what you are really talking about in this book, of the healing practice of community, the healing practice of resilience and resistance? Is this something that is dealt with within these pages?
Yes, I spend an extensive amount of time on community. I actually name community and flesh it out in 2 chapters, in which I talk about Chebujin as the metaphor for community and communal self-care. And then in the self-care chapter, I speak again about this is not an individual endeavor, it's a collective endeavor. So yes, all of that is addressed in the text.
And I like that, you know, you are saying that it is not or, it's and, that
Yes,
it
sir.
has, like, it's together, and it's together within these communities. Trauma happens regardless, but the healing comes when resistance is part of the spiritual practice of community.
We all of it. You have to have the cultural piece, you have to have the spiritual piece, you have to be in community. Like, we're not going to create social change, we're not going to get social justice, we're not going to eradicate white supremacy without taking time to heal our wounds and begin to continue to engage in the process. Right. All of those elements are important. And there is room.
And do we really see that there is an opportunity to eradicate white supremacy?
I'm not holding my breath, Donna.
Okay.
Right.
I'm not holding my breath.
And I think that's a good way to segue into the last question, right? Like, question we ask of everyone. This is a hip hop political talk show, and we are asking, and we do like the link between spirituality, culture, and politics. And we always ask our guests, you know, who is your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group, or who are you rocking with right now? And it could be, like, you know, something that is hip hop adjacent that is strengthening your soul at this moment.
I'm gonna do 3. 1, all time favorite, Mos Def, Talib Kweli. Yeah, I'm a 90s girl. Number 2, I love me some Burna Boy, because he said before we was anything else, we was African, and that just resonates with me. I know he's not hardcore hip hop like that, but he does say some things that need to be heard. And then 3rd, hip hop adjacent and intersecting, Robert Glasper, Black Radio 3.
All right. Now, Robert Glasper is probably one of my favorite. He's actually my favorite artist.
Yeah, overall. I love him because he brings it all together: the R&B, the hip hop, and the jazz. Right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Like he
Not
literally,
just
as
the first
I was
time I
talking
heard you
earlier,
acknowledge a jazz artist.
you said what? I'm sorry.
First time I heard you acknowledge a jazz artist.
Oh, me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, yeah, Robert Glasper is actually my favorite overall artist because of all of the things he does in genres. You can listen to one album and have three genres. You listen to
Yes.
I listened to the soundtrack. The first time the movie The Photograph is the first time I really heard of him because he did the soundtrack for that, and the soundtrack was so amazing. It just stood out from the first 5 minutes of the movie. I was like, the music is like a character. The music is so pronounced. It's like a character. It reminded me of something that Spike Lee was doing
Yes,
when he
with
would
Terrence
do
Blanchard.
music.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I was like, who
Yes.
is this person
Yes.
who's doing this music? And why is this music so tight? And it was Robert Glasper. I started listening to other things he said, and I was like, I got it. I understand. I
Yes. He's
understand. So,
dope. He's best.
yep.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I know we have our
Thank
other
you.
guests in the background right now, but we're gonna have to have you back on. I know we planned this for a while, and I'm really glad that we had you on. We have gone over time, but we have both of our guests in the background for the next segment. But thank you so much for coming on. An honor to have you on. I am glad one of my former debaters put me in touch with you because she loved your work and appreciated what you were doing. So thank you so much for coming on.
As she leaves, John, I want to put you in touch with some of the work that we're doing in Newark, New Jersey. Mayor Rasparaka is breaking his neck to make Newark a trauma-informed city.
Right.
And he's doing everything from making our police department be trained in trauma down to all those folks who are doing the work trying to stop the violence in our community and beyond. So there's some things we may have some other places for you to share, my queen. So stay tuned.
Absolutely.
Right,
We're going to put you together with Keisha and everything that's going on in Newark in terms of trauma and dealing with. So thank you so much. An honor to have you on. And you're going to come back? You're going to come back with us?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right. Take care. All right. So that is All Politics So Local, America's number one hip hop radio, political hip hop talk show. So thank you so much. We have our next guest on, and we're going right back into the politics, right? Like we're kind of coming down. We've had a real intense night with our first guest being someone who knew someone and was in the community and really a survivor of the 16th Street bombings and the 16th Street church bombings and in 59 years ago. And we, had this conversation.
And that was Gwen Moten?
Yes, with Gwen Moten.
Oh, wow.
We had her on, and then we had followed by Phyllis Jeffers-Colly talking about dealing with how to deal with the trauma that comes from basically being Black, resisting, existing within this space. So very, very intense evening. Now I hear now Zaid says that you are here to bring us some bad news, some stuff that's going on. We have Ron Pierce of the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice and Philip Hensley from the League of Women Voters talking about like something that's basic in terms of voting and voting rights, and a fight that we have fought, shouldn't have to fight again. That seems to be a fight that's going on right now. What's going on?
Yeah.
Good morning. Good evening. First, I want to say,
did you want to say something first? So, Ron, you were saying something?
First, I was going to say it's really hard to follow the two acts you had before. That was powerful, and I'm really still reeling in my brain, trying to grasp all of the knowledge that they were imparting on us, and I appreciate them very much. But what's going on now is in January, we got a law passed that said police shouldn't be within 100 feet. Now, 100 feet, as you know, is not a long distance, but 100 feet of a polling place, other than when they're going in to vote. And so it was pretty intense trying to get the law passed. We had a fight and a half, but just recently, 2131 and A 2131 and let me get the number, S 2912 are being pushed to put police in polling places in schools and in senior centers. And on the face, that sounds neutral and sounds like it's why not? But when you look at what it really is, right? And it was alluded to yesterday that 3 out of 4 polling places in Camden are either in a school or in a senior center. 3 out of 4. While in the whole county of Warren, right, all of the vast majority of the polling places, right? Now, Warren County is 80% white, just so you understand. Just trying to make it clear on this topic, right? But they vote in municipal buildings. They vote in the libraries, and they vote in their firehouses. So this target of police seems to be aimed at inner city, and I'll let my colleague from the league speak more, and I could speak on this in further detail, and I could speak on 3 different topics. I want to speak on dealing with why this is not good, but I want to let my colleague speak first.
Ron, let me set it up first because we didn't even get a chance really to introduce you. This is Ron Pierce from New Jersey Institute for Social Justice and Philip Hensley from the League of Women's Voters in New Jersey. We just found out really just a few days ago that there was this bill being pushed, as Ron was trying to describe, to allow for a police presence in polling places, particularly in schools, right? Now, the background of this is important, right? Early in January, the state passed a law preventing that, right? And this comes from the historical legacy of the place of police at polls intimidating Black and brown voters, right? And folks want to think and paint the picture that this was a Southern thing, right? When the fact is that there has been a historical problem that has been well documented. There's been a serious point of challenge in other places where the police were at the polls in intimidating ways here in New Jersey, right? So I want that background to be laid out, and I want that y'all tell how the bill has been pushed, who's pushing it, who's behind it, why it's dangerous, and how we can resist. But Ron, you started. Let me bring Philip into the conversation. And I want to welcome you both because it's the first time for both of you being with us on All Politics Are Local. Philip, why don't you jump on in and tell us how the league sees this?
Absolutely. Thanks, Zayed, and thanks for the invitation. Really honored to be here. So the league's involvement in this comes down to what the league's all about. You know, we're all about voting rights and expanding access to the right to vote. And you're exactly right, Zayed, about the fact that we have this history in New Jersey, right? Going back to, a lot of you will already know this history, a lot of the listeners will know, but going back to 1981, the so-called Ballot Security Task Force in that gubernatorial election, off-duty officers with armbands deployed specifically in Newark and Trenton, Black neighborhoods, Latino neighborhoods, suppressing the vote. Racialized voter suppression is a thing in New Jersey. It has been, and so there was a consent decree. The Department of Justice came in and said, you can't do this, but that expired. That expired in 2017. We can't rely on the courts, to defend voting rights. We've learned that. And in 2019, a great coalition of advocates, Ron was there, the Institute was there, we were there, lots of others too, passed this law to say, you can't have police officers in polling places. And now for reasons that I, to be honest with you, don't fully understand. And there's a suggestion that it's about, a concern about safety in schools, right? There's a suggestion that that's the reason, but it doesn't really hold water. There's a suggestion that, we need to have police officers in schools in case something happens. But like Ron said, the current law, the law that we passed in earlier this year, 2019, and then came through into this year, already addresses that. Police can be deployed in case of an emergency, a disturbance, in case of senior centers. If there's just a safety concern, you can have a police officer there, and they can be within 100 feet, right? So it's already giving them access to the premises in case there's anything that would come up, So there's no real security concern here. There's no necessity of this bill in terms of school security or anything else. And so our concern is, this would be abused to potentially, intended or not, suppress the vote again.
All right, so question on this. I work in a school. We have a police officer who's on the premises of the school, right? And that's normal. In many schools in Newark, we have police officers who are in the schools. They don't show their guns. They are very discreet in terms of, they deal with kids, right? So they're very, very discreet, or at least I believe we still do, but I know that we used to as of last year, have a police officer that was regularly in the schools. But when there are elections in our school too, right? We have a polling place, but the polling place is not next to where the police officer would be stationed anyway. We have security guards who are around, right? Just because there's a police officer in the school or stationed in the school, does that mean that they need to be next to the polling place? Couldn't there, because schools are big places, right? There are gymnasiums, their front doors, they're different. Most schools have a layout that, and if they have 400 or 500 people in it, there are a lot of different places. And most of the time, the polling place isn't right next to, or it doesn't necessarily need to be right next to where the officer is situated, especially if we're talking about 100 feet. Have they talked about, just because the police officer's in a school, does that mean they need to be within 100 feet of a polling place, given the history of intimidation that some people might feel?
Well, that is a great question, and the law as it stands would not have an issue with a police officer in the school, but the law is trying to change it where they can be within the 100 feet. So they're trying to put them in the polling place itself, because if it's not 100, if it's over 100 feet, police officers are allowed. They can't be within 100 feet. That's the way the law reads currently. So what purpose would this law serve if not to put them within the polling place itself? And the problem with that, is that historically, as Philip has mentioned, historically there's been a lot of police intimidation, and we had a consent decree to 2017, right? But we also in 2019 advanced people to be able to vote that are on parole and probation that have criminal histories, and these are people that have to deal every day with certain other collateral consequences that they deal with, and we had one person speak at the hearing yesterday. He did 25 years in prison for a crime that he didn't commit. He's an exoneree out of Camden who speaks of the trauma, not only of being concerned that he's going to have to deal with the police that may decide he has done something wrong and lock him up again. And he has to deal with the trauma of dealing with the 25 years he's already did in prison, where he had to deal with police in every vector of his life. So he spoke about that. And no matter how innocuous police can be, right? If you have a person on parole or you have a person on probation, I don't know about probation, but if you have a person on parole, right? And he has an encounter with a police officer, no matter what that context is, he has to report it, because if it comes back to his parole officer, it could actually have a negative effect on his ability to advance in the parole status. The parole status has stages, and those stages make it depend on how much how closely you're monitored. So he has to go through the whole process of going to parole, telling him, I've had a police contact, here's what it was all about. And they just have I've talked to many, and they just feel that is just another tactic to keep them out of voting. Now, I also register people on parole and probation to vote, and me and the organization, or the Race Council, Reformed Alliance for Civic Engagement, go into parole halfway back programs and day reporting centers to register people to vote. And a lot of the people are young black men who always say, look, they don't want to hear from us. We're not part of this. They have this negative connotation that nobody wants them to be there. And because the police will be there, that's just one more level that they're going to say, see, they don't want us here. Why should we bother engaging? And we all know, the studies show engagement helps create community. And my voice is one voice. Your voice is one voice, right? But the voices that are being silenced, right? Silence the communal voice, and that's the real problem that we're having. If the studies show that putting police in polling places will lower the black population's voting outcome by 32%.
Wait, that's the statistic? That's the number?
Yes.
Wait. So there's okay. So that was the question I was going to ask, right? Like, the big question was, because I'm thinking of, in a polling place. And
get my numbers right, but it's 30.
My big question was, is there any documentation that shows, because if a police officer is just around, that people will not go to the polls, or people will be less likely to go to the polls, and because part of me is wondering, why are police why is there a push for this bill, right? Because it's not really a safety concern. You haven't heard about people getting shot up at the polls, right? And people need to be saved and protected. And essentially, it seems like if people don't want police at the polls, it's why are they there? Because they're supposed to protect and serve. So if they're not, unless there's a demand for unless there are a bunch of black and brown people yes, we want police at the polls, then why would there be a push for that to happen anyway? Because there's no demand. There's no need. There's, so you're saying that what you're telling me is that if police officers are seen at the polls, there is a documented decrease in turnout, as in it will make a certain part of the population, particularly in black and brown communities, come to the poll less. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, that's what I'm telling you. I'm trying. I want to give you the data, and I'm trying to find the study right now. But
as you're doing that, Ron, let's lift this question. As you're doing that, let's lift up this question: who's pushing the bill? Let's just get at this for real.
Right.
Who's pushing the bill? Who's going
Yeah, who's for this, right? Why is there a push for this?
Bill sponsors, and why? How is it that this bill has gotten so far so quickly?
Right, because I'm just trying to figure out, if black and brown people are no, we don't want it, and the whole reason for the police is to protect and serve, then it would seem like they're not needed at a polling place, right? I've never heard of someone getting mugged at the polls, right? I've never heard of people like, oh my gosh, there just need to be more police at the polls, or people complaining, oh my God, did you see all the drug dealing in the street at the polls, right? Like where I was trying to vote, but there was so much trafficking. Like I just don't. I've never heard that complaint, right? I've never heard that. Oh, I've just felt intimidated by people because the polling place was a dangerous place for. So yeah, who's pushing this bill?
So I can answer that to an extent. I feel like we don't know the whole story still, because like you're saying, Jonathan, there is no real security concern. So the full motivation for this is still, at least to me, a little bit of a mystery. But this started with a bill in the Senate. Senator Teresa Ruiz pushed this bill forward, and there was a hearing, and we came out and we testified against it, and it didn't move for a little bit. And now we have this
bill.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Teresa Ruiz from Newark, New Jersey pushed this bill?
That's correct, yes.
Did not know. Okay.
Very interesting. Go ahead. Keep talking.
Yeah. So and then we just found out this past week, and that's why we had this hearing yesterday in the Assembly about an Assembly companion to that bill, which at first seemed like it was gonna be a little bit less expansive than the Senate bill. You know, it didn't have schools in it, but then they amended it so it was like the Ruiz bill, and it included police in polling places in schools. And I think, our general thinking about this is similar to what you're already saying, that, whether it's a fear on politicians' part about, just in case, when the Senate bill first came up, lots of coverage about shootings in Texas schools. So part of the thinking had been maybe it was related to concern about that. But as we've been saying, any reasonable concern is already addressed by what they can do with 100 feet. So I wish I could tell you what's really behind it.
Fair question. Where are the police unions in relationship to this bill?
I haven't seen public statements from PBA or police unions. It's quite possible they'd be supportive. I wouldn't be surprised.
It just really does seem like we really just have a lot of questions. And are there other sponsors besides Teresa Ruiz? Who else is sponsoring the bill, and where are they from? Do you know?
So I'm looking at the Senate bill. Primary sponsors: Teresa Ruiz, Patrick Diamond, and then we had the Assembly bill.
Where's Patrick Diamond from? Like, what is he a Democrat, a Republican? Where are they from?
Right. So he's also a Democrat, South Plainfield, I believe.
Okay, so these are two minority areas.
South Plainfield has become very much an immigrant community of color in recent years.
Right. So these are two communities of color that are calling for this, which is interesting. And what is the other side saying in this hearing?
Well, it's interesting.
You were talking about the Assembly. Who are the Assembly people? And then that question.
Sure. The Assembly, let me just make sure I get all the names correct. But I believe we had Reynolds Jackson on the bill. Somebody with Reynolds Jackson, who, often we agree with on lots of issues, but not on this one. And I think to the question of, what is the other side saying, there wasn't a lot of back and forth. Everybody who testified at this most recent hearing yesterday was us, the Institute, NAACP, ACLU, with one voice in opposition. There wasn't anyone there standing in favor.
So you had this is just weird, right? So you have a bill that is supported by predominantly minority communities on the Senate and the Assembly side, right? Like these are predominantly minority communities supporting a bill to keep police within 100 feet of polling places. But there's studies that say that if you do that, there will be voter suppression. Like they will suppress the vote in these minority communities. Is that something that has been forefronted? Because I think that maybe if that's the first thing, because I didn't like even in this interview, I didn't realize that until I asked the question going in, and I'm trying to figure out like the anecdote is cool, but a study that says if police are at the polls, that turnout's 32% less. I think that's the big thing to start with, right? Like why would you support a bill even with good intention if there are studies that have been done that say it suppresses the vote by like 32%, and you have all these civil rights organizations come against it? I would just be curious. I would be curious to know if the people who are supporting the bill know this. I mean, like, I'm just curious. I'm asking, right? Like, is this something that is widely known? Like the study that came out that this is voter suppression. If you have police at the polls, there's going to be voter suppression, like massively, like 32%, like bad. Was that a fact that or study that was put on the forefront of the discussion of this issue?
This issue came up so quickly, nobody had time to really discuss it. Nobody thought that this was coming up, but the study is in a journal called Democracy and Security, Volume 18, from 2022, Issue 2. The study was published on 28th of December, 2021, and it's called Policing Polling Places in the United States, the Negative Effect of Police Presence on African American Turnout in an Alabama Election. And it talks about 32% reduction and how devastating this is. So I can't go into the whole study, but the study specifically is
by
that larger percentage.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Was it a study by D. Niven?
Yes. That's who his study was by.
Okay.
David Niven, I'm sorry.
David Niven, right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer your question, I mean, about was this brought up? Yeah, it was brought up in testimony yesterday. I think it was Ron's colleague, Yannick Wood at the Institute. He was the first to testify, and he said, we know that's Alabama and not New Jersey, but the effects aren't going to be so different, I think. And so that was brought up. It was the first piece of evidence that was put before them.
And clearly you're talking about the effects would be because most people who are making the laws don't really know what regular people or common people go through, or people who have had issues with the law or don't trust law enforcement, like Ron Pierce. What you said was that if you look at it anecdotally, and you look at someone who was on parole, especially given that New Jersey has we talked about this in class today. Our class is doing a voter registration drive, right? And so we're doing certain things along those lines. And one of the things that we were clear on is that if you were convicted of a crime, but if served your time and are no longer on parole, right? Like if you are no longer under the auspices of the criminal justice system, then your right to vote, you have it again. Like it's automatically returned. The laws were passed so that you can vote. Now, it seems like if New Jersey has just passed a law where former felons can automatically vote, they can vote again, and the law's new, it seems like if someone is paranoid, which it seems like what the study is saying is that, people might feel some kind of way about the police, interaction with the police. It doesn't mean you have done something wrong, but there may be a history of being mistreated by the police. And you see them and you're like, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to go in the vicinity where they're there and
let me interject right there, Jonathan, because the elephant in the room or the reality is that that there is a different perception or there's a reality that there are different interactions with the police. A young African American woman or man may have a different interaction with a police officer, um, uh, other than their Caucasian um, uh, sister or brother. It just may be a different interaction from how, from the onset, from how the conversation goes, how the demeanor and everything is. And that in itself is something that that's the first thing we have to deal with. Oh my gosh! Oh, I'm being stopped by the police. What's this for? Oh, or where, somebody else would be, "Hey, officer, how you doing? Glad to see you today." It's two different interactions.
Yeah, and yeah. It's just really wild in terms of the stuff you're talking about. I know we're coming to the end of this particular segment, but Ken, in wrapping this up, what is being like? What is the next move? What is
Yes,
being
right.
done?
There you go.
Well, I think it's pretty, straightforward. Just contact your state legislators. I think, this thing has gone, unfortunately, kind of, like Ron said, it's come up pretty recently. It's been a little bit under the radar. And some of the, misinformation, or just if it's framed as just a school security thing without getting into the details, people might think, oh, this is kind of innocuous. It's, contact them and say there's no reason for this, and that we can't go back to a time in New Jersey where, this voter suppression was a reality with police. And so I think it's important for people to be aware that this is coming, and to talk to your legislators, because, like you said, maybe it's legislators in the areas that will be affected who are pushing this, who should be hearing from folks.
Right, and more particularly, don't necessarily know that it's even unintentional voter suppression is voter suppression, right? Like, I think what the study makes it clear is, even if you think that the police are there to protect schools, if they're within 100 feet of the polling place, which, even if they're in a school, is unnecessary, then you're talking about potentially a suppression factor of 30%. And the qualitative reason is just, if you've had issues with the law, you might be a little more paranoid, right? Like, we don't think, like, the people who are making the laws don't necessarily think like the people who are receiving the brunt of those laws, because they have different experiences. And I think the study and the qualitative conversation that you were talking about, Ron Pierce, in terms of talking to people about why they're affected by it, is something that has larger implications on the community. And even because these are Democrats and Democratic districts who are supporting this, which means that they may not know that they're undercutting their own votes when this happens.
That's a really good point. I do want to add that you asked what can people do. We have a phone to action link on our website, so people can go to the New Jersey Institute website, hit the phone to action link, and it will direct them right to their legislators. www.njisj.org. I don't know the direct, but that'll take
Jonathan,
you right.
I want to share this out, Jonathan. I'm putting it here.
All right. You could put it also, just put it right, instead of in the private chat, just post it. If you post it right there, it's right there.
Comments?
Yeah. And you're right. It doesn't have to be an intentional on the person that's advancing the law or the bill. It's probably not intentional, but it is what it is. And
right.
And when you see a bill that's advancing, that's not in the interest of the community, we must come together as a community and fight against these bills. And I think to the part of the second person the second Black woman that was speaking, there's a lot of trauma, especially for formerly incarcerated people, and I speak for that in large part a lot because I am formerly incarcerated. But there's a lot of trauma when you have been incarcerated with dealing with the police, because you are coming from an authoritarian situation in the prison. And the reality is New Jersey has the highest racial disparity in the country when it comes to incarceration. So we are talking about 61% of all people that have been incarcerated are Black, and another 18% are brown. So we're talking almost 80% of the population that is incarcerated is Black and brown. So when we talk about the trauma that they're dealing with, we have to look at the new law that came into effect and look at how that is going to affect the newly enfranchised.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Again, and just asking the last question that will lead us into our last segment, and that is on who. This is a hip hop talk show, and who is your favorite hip hop artist, individual, or group? Who inspires you, especially in this moment? It could be any of the above. Who do you want to raise up?
Jonathan, we have to let Hakeem ask that question.
Oh yes, yes. I wanted to. I always want when Hakeem Green comes on. I always want to give him a special introduction as Brooks' ambassador to hip hop. And he is an amazing artist. He's an intellectual. He lives and thinks the culture as well. He is someone who works with KRS-One. He is someone who works with many others, but he really does 24 hours of peace, where he brings people from all over together for the sake of peace and hip hop culture and community. So, and anytime I have Hakeem Green on, I've just got to give a long introduction first because he deserves that long introduction.
Thank you, John.
Because he really is North ambassador to hip hop.
Yeah. So, Ron, Philip, who you vibing out to on the hip hop side?
Okay. First, let me say that I first seen this person perform in Rahway State Prison. His name is Lottie Dot, and he's out of Jersey City, and he's home now, and he's recording again, and he's doing some fantastic work, and I just want to lift him up because I think by far his message is strong, powerful, and I think it can resonate with social change.
Say his name one more time.
His name is Lottie Da.
All right, big shout out to him. What's up, Philip? Who you got?
Hey, I think my favorite hip hop artist of all time, Del, the Funky Homo Sapien.
West Coast.
West Coast, yeah, just amazing, lyrical, whimsical, Afrofuturist, really excellent.
Oh yeah, no doubt, I agree. I concur.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on, and we'll definitely have to have you back to give us some updates as well.
Thank you, Rose. It was great to be on part of your show. It really was a powerful show, and I'll be back as a listener for sure.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. And did both of them give their artists?
Yes.
Okay.
They did.
Thank you.
Take care. All right. So,
a Brady bunch effect going on right now.
Okay.
Yes. All right. So, Hakeem Green.
Yes, sir.
Man, I always like having you on the show. I feel like I learn something every time that you are on. And I really am always impressed and proud of the work that you do in terms of centering both hip hop with anti-violence, with a thoughtful message, with breaking down the culture and the business. There's just and its relationship to the politics in general, right? Like of who we are. So in this moment, right? Like I know that we talked just briefly earlier. I texted you back, and I wanted you to talk about Coolio. I know Coolio passed away, very recently. So,
damn, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the younger people might even know who he is, right? Like, but just
Gangsta's Paradise. Just Google Gangsta's Paradise.
Yeah,
one of the greatest songs of all time. Flip one of those Stevie Wonder joint, but Lord have mercy. Yeah. I got a chance to meet Coolio 1994 at the Gavin Music Conference in San Francisco. And my A&R, Malik Levy, big shout out to him. was old friends of Coolio, knew him from the hip hop set in California. And when we met him, he immediately embraced us and started dropping all types of jewels on us about what to look out for, how to conduct business, how you should carry yourself. And always a fun-loving dude. Always, I got a chance to run into him in West Palm Beach at a Naughty by Nature. It was Naughty by Nature, Coolio, Vanilla Ice, Dreads from Black Sheep, and a bunch of other folks. And hadn't seen him in years. He embraced me like it was yesterday, and it was all love. And that's how he carried himself for the most part. He had the reality show on, I believe, MTV for some years, where we kind of saw another side to him that showed his, more of the human side to him, the ups and the downs. But to see him bounce back out of those negative situations and keep the career continuing. And I saw him at New Year's Eve 2017 in Miami. Once again, sees me and it's like, oh God, what's going on? It was like yesterday. Just carried that positive energy. And hip hop has lost a legend. Entertainment, music. The dude was a phenomenal person, phenomenal personality, and he'll be missed tremendously. The outpouring of love from around the hip hop community is major. Everybody's like sending shout outs to him and his family. And he was a loved individual, and it shows.
I know
What
that.
happened? What happened to little brother? What happened?
Right now, it looks like cardiac arrest.
Wow.
Yeah, I haven't heard the official statement, but he's 59 years old.
He was 59.
59. And he had some battles with drug addiction and alcoholism.
Yeah.
Like I said, to see him recover and bounce back from where he came from, even before the big records, in the 80s, he had some substance abuse problems that he was able to conquer and then have the tremendous music career,
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, so all that living, I'm sure it takes its toll over time, and it takes some years off of our life, which is why we have to be particular in what we eat, what we consume, digest, having a good time, but limiting the substances because it takes a toll on you. It steals from the other side of your life, and we have to be wary of that.
Wow.
Absolutely. And I know that just in terms of the people talk, like I know that a lot of times on this show we talk like hip hop's old now, right? Hip hop's gotten older, and as hip hop gets older, it seems like we are talking like when DJ Rhino, we're all talking. We're talking about a lot of obituaries, right? We're talking about a lot of old people passing, who we grew up with,
and some not so old.
Right. True. Right. Like, true. A lot of they talks also about a lot of younger hip hop artists who are just getting killed. Right. Like, so there's this constant theme running through it, like always ran through hip hop. But I think that it's got two sides. Like we always had a lot of people die young because that is the nature of our community. Right. Like in terms of high rates of mortality among young Black males. And I think that it gets, there was an essay that I read not long ago where the Black male's talking about when he got into his 50s, his friends started dying, acquaintance started dying again, almost like when they're in their 20s. So in their 20s, not surviving. When they're in their 50s, they start dying at a clip for health reasons, etc. So I'm not saying that you are older Hakeem Green, because you look very young. You look like you're in your 30s. You look like a young man in hip hop, and
you gotta shine. That's right.
Right. So right, water. Right. Exactly. So what is it that, like, what advice or what? Or how do you see, right? Really, just how do you see aging and entertainment and the changes that are going on right now?
Man, we're at that age, and people I came up with dropping like flies, unfortunately, for all types of reasons, and it's growing up in American society, American urban society, where there are food deserts, and we didn't get the education on food and nutrition and what you should be eating. I remember coming up in the 70s and 80s and, running all day on a bowl of cereal, some Dipsy Doodles, some quarter waters. And, you come home and there's food on the stove, but it's a pot of ragu spaghetti, straight sugar. Salad is iceberg lettuce. We
the
eating
least
good
green out of
food
all of them.
is smothered chicken, yams, collard greens. That's not good eating. That's actually unhealthy eating. But we think it's good eating. And we carry a lot of bad habits throughout 20
Well, you can do it once a year.
party.
You can do it once a year.
I mean, once a year, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Christmas. But it's not like, that was like a major, that was a major meal weekly for me.
That was Sunday. It was Sunday dinner.
Sunday dinner. And then leftovers, you carry that over to Wednesday.
Michelle Obama said
Thursday, you go to Popeye's churches.
Yeah, Michelle Obama said that we all love Sunday dinner. The problem is when we have a Sunday dinner 7 days a week.
7 days a week. But even, one day a week, you do it for Family Day, Thanksgiving, during the holidays, Christmas, Kwanzaa, etc. I'm not, that's good. But to do it regularly throughout the year is not a good look. And on top of it, we're not exercising, we're not moving our body around. We don't understand the concept of fiber and what fiber does for you. So we're walking around literally full of,
That's right.
We don't understand fasting and
colon caught up full of caca. That's right.
Yeah, and then we're piling junk on top of junk on top of junk, and we don't have no idea how much is backed up in us, causing dis-ease. It's causing dis-ease. A lot of our sicknesses in our 50s, 60s is relative to the food we ate in our 20s and 30s. I mean, we thought it was good food: fried chicken, fried this, fried that.
Sugar this, sugar that.
Sugar this, sugar rice. White rice is sugar. White potatoes is sugar. Pasta is sugar. Bread is sugar. It's sugar, sugar, sugar. And we're not flushing ourselves out, and the toxins that we're walking around with, is no wonder so many of us are checking out early.
Right.
But, these are lessons I've learned throughout my own bump in my head. I remember I had caught a bad case of hemorrhoids, and that's when I found out about fiber.
Right.
Boy, stay away from the iceberg lettuce. Get yourself some green leaf. Get yourself some romaine. Get yourself some arugula. Add some spinach in there. Get that
kale.
It's like, whoa, I was messed up.
Like
I thought I was eating good. That's the.
And it's funny how our system changed. I immediately feel like I can pull into Burger King or McDonald's and grab something out of there, and within the time I get back to my desk, I'm like so lethargic. It's just unbelievable. It's like a sleeping pill, the most effective sleeping pill I've ever taken. It just depresses my whole system. I want to go to sleep. I just want to. It respond. Your body just responds to it so quickly, whereas you can do the opposite. I could eat, like I could grab a salad with some beets and like a light juice or something, and I could just feel, I feel light. I want to keep going. My mind is sharp. Is so on. So it's definitely, we have to pay attention of what we're putting in our tummies.
I've been experimenting with the keto lifestyle, actually, because I don't know if it's neuropathy, if it's RA, whatever's going on with me. I eat the wrong thing, my hands cramp up. I get really bad pains in my hands, arms, elbows. You know, it's been going on for a while, and it took me a minute to correlate it to the food I was eating and which foods do me the worst. So there's no more like red meat is out my diet. There's no more rice, no more potatoes. Can't do potatoes anymore. All those starches out, processed foods out. No fast food at all. I can't think about it. That doesn't work for me. Pizza is not good for me anymore. Like it's hectic. You know, I got a nice regimen. You know, along with working out and trying to stay heart healthy, getting that cardio in, and yeah, because you know, quality of life, especially towards the end of your life, is extremely important, and we gotta learn to treat our bodies right, so our bodies will treat us right as we get older.
Yes, sir. That's right.
I wanna change the subject a little bit and talk about a bill that was recently passed in California, which basically outlawed the using of rap lyrics inside of testimonies, right? Like you can't use lyrics to convict somebody. Like recently, Gunna in Georgia was convicted based on the use of rap lyrics. There was a bill in New York that was passed. I mean, a bill in New York that failed. You know, where rap lyrics can be used uh, to you know, convict someone as circumstantial evidence. California apparently just signed a bill today that is supported by many people, including Ice Cube, that makes it illegal to use the rap lyrics to convict. Some saying, you know, Ice Cube saying this is really important. But is this like a big deal? Does it matter? Is it just a distraction? Like what is going on with this thing?
You know, 6 in one hand, half a dozen other. If somebody's committing crimes and they're talking about it on the record, you know what I mean? Like if somebody murdered somebody and they admitted to it on record, it's on record. It's recorded.
Sure is.
I mean, what about the victims? I don't know. I mean, I understand that you give, you know, government agencies, law enforcement agencies, the power to use your words against you. We don't want to be there. So I think that's a good thing. But if people are committing crimes, I mean, we're, you know, because we blur it, so keep it real, keep it real, keep it real. Right. So the line between keeping it real and artistic license gets blurred. When is it artistic license and when is it, no, the person's actually telling on themselves and taunting the ops.
Right.
The thing now is my ops and I'm making music taunting my opposition, my enemies in the street.
So what you're saying is that, like, yeah, it's good not to give the government excess power, but there's a larger problem that we have to deal with when part of what is going on right now is taunting, like people literally taunting over murdering other people, right? Yeah. There's this like, well, if you're stupid enough to self-snitch, okay. Is that what you're saying? You're like, if you're dumb enough to self-snitch, you weren't good for yourself anyway.
Right.
Bye.
And you see, like, you know, who's making the money off of this, you know, and it's, again, not us. We're not reaping the greater rewards. You know, the result in a lot of these cases are rappers are dying early, and then their estates are in the hands of lawyers who are not them. Their estates in the hands of record companies and distribution companies who are not them. Streaming platforms are raping artists these days. I mean, straight raping us in a very bad way. And artists are dying. Well, who's collecting these royalties that are owed to them? Who's tracking the publishing that's owed to them? These songs where, you know, they're being taunted and taunting are generating millions and millions of dollars, and they're not collecting that money. Their families aren't eating off that money, but they're paying the highest price with their lives, whether being murdered or being in jail for murdering somebody or being associated with murders.
So it seems what you're saying is that it really, whether the police or prosecutors can use this or not, yeah, it's good the prosecutors can't use it, but there seems to be a serious and deeper problem. Like even if, like, a lot of artists say that, look, they're just making it up, it's just art, right? Like, you just think it's like opposition, but it's like when I'm writing, like Pusha T would be like, well, I'm writing a fictional story, and I'm kind of like, The Godfather, and it's just a fictional story that I'm just spinning, like, Mario Puzo or any of the other gangster films that are there. But I think that you have a particular answer to that too, as well, right? Like, and so that's why, like, yeah, police shouldn't be able to use it. But here's the thing: like, what is your response to that?
If it's fantasy and it's artistic license, I don't have a problem with that. It's just like Hollywood or the Godfather movie or the Scarface movie or Kings of New York. These are fantasy movies. It's artistic. You should have it's freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Right? But if the writer of the movie is hiding his real crimes in the movie, or the writer of the book is actually talking about real murders in the book, and I can use the book to solve the murder, it means I can't use the book to solve the murder? You mean we've been looking for these bodies, we can't find them, but in one of these songs, he actually tells us where the bodies are, and we can't use that song to find the victims? I don't, how far does that go? It's like a double-edged sword. I mean, yeah, as an artist, I want to be able to freely say what I need to say, but I don't want to taunt people with my art. I don't want to send threats of violence, real threats of violence. I don't want to have beef with somebody and tell the person in the song, I'm going to kill you. The person dies, and bro, you said in your song you was going to kill him. I mean, you were within X, like, I mean, how far does that go?
Right. And it seems like you're implying that's just part of a deeper problem of like the law won't solve the actual problem, right? The problem is that how does murder get into your song so that it's realistic, so that it's not clearly fantasy, right? Like, how does murder get so deeply embedded in your lyrics that it's that it can be real, regardless of whether it's prosecuted or not? Like, the realness of it seems to be a problem in and of itself. That seems to be a problem beyond law. And I want to. Well, what do you have to say about that? And also, I want to bring up a moment that you brought up the last time you were on, and the mayor brought up at a different time you were on. But talk to me about that. Like what is this thing about the industry and like the blurring of the lines between fantasy and criminality?
Man, it's so layered, Jonathan. It's everything from the last 30 years of gangster hip hop, right? To the video games, to just American pop culture. It's just the commercialization of guns and violence. It's the lack of value we have for ourselves. We've been commodified to the point where I'll kill you and go get famous off killing you. I'll murk you. I'll pick beef with you online. Social media is a big place where careers are launched from beef, from attacking somebody. Just, I'm going to make a name attacking you. And, that's, I think it's been a steady diet of so much negative information for so long. It's kind of hard to pinpoint and say that's where it started. But, who shot you? By Notorious B.I.G., allegedly is about the shooting of Tupac. He got shot at Quad. Who shot you? Separate the weak from the obsolete. Like, that was the national anthem. The story on the street is, it was a hit on Pac. Now, whether that was the truth, whether Biggie had anything to do with the actual shooting of Tupac at Quad, because of that song, that fueled the street rumor, so the retaliation and the, Tupac makes hit him up, and you see where that ends for them, and that's like the archetype, and then we've been repeating the archetype ever since, where that's the model is to be Tupac, is to be big, is to be respected, and put that work out on the street and let people know what it is. And we've really given our kids poison with the music. At this point, it's poison. People say, "Oh no, it's artistic license, it's freedom of speech." If there's a point to it, other than just the gratuitous nature of what they're doing, if there was a point to it, but the point is popularity and money. That's the point. And once we're there, it's going to be hard to go back. And then you see, the politics are local. All politics are local, no doubt. To see certain hip hop artists have the level of influence they have with government, it's interesting. Right. It's just interesting.
No, I think that there were moments, right? Like, I think that when you're talking about cultural moments in hip hop and this whole, I always call it, I like to say, like the ghost of C. Dolores Tucker, right? Like how she keeps creeping back into our conversations about violence and culture and what it means, right? Like when she was like, gangster rap bad because it's disrespecting women, it's promoting murder. It is like, and people were disrespecting her back in the day and talking about how she was out of touch. And it seems like as hip hop ages and the bodies increase, that people are like, she was right.
It's funny, we had a classic, legendary song called Free Mumia.
That's right.
In it, we go after C. Dolores Tucker.
That's right.
Because for us, there were bigger fish to fry. There were more important issues that we needed to be dealing with. It wasn't to say that she was wrong. It's just to say that, you're picking, the real enemy is what's going on over here.
She went out of her way to attack hip hop, and she could have been attacking the state for framing Mumia.
Right.
But even in this, right? Like, I just want to push it back a little because we keep talking about the same thing she was talking about in terms of culture. So maybe she wasn't talking about the wrong thing. If we need, like, the moment that you had, like, at the 24 hours of peace, like, you have a thing called 24 hours of peace to unite hip hop and peace. And a couple of weeks ago, right, when there was an act that was doing things that might, or saying things that might not have been, interpreted as peaceful, right? Sure, right after you ask some questions of the audience, like, just to raise. I don't want to say it again wrong, man, but like, can you tell us that moment, like, as we close out here, because we're at time. Can you tell us that moment and what you asked and what the reaction was and what that means culturally in hip hop? So I think that's really where we're talking.
So we had G Herbo, Too Rare, and Fabio Foreign on our Saturday bill. 3 huge artists, very successful, extremely talented. However, the messages are not really in line with, say, 24 hours of peace. However, we know they're going to bring out the folks who need to hear peace, love, unity, safety, having fun. G Herbo gave an excellent performance. However, the content, again, being so contrary to the messaging that we're trying to push, got a little crazy, and the mayor just pushed me to kind of, create the bridge it over. So before G Herbo left the stage, I congratulated him, saluted him for the performance that he gave. I'm talking about 10,000 people out there, 10,000. And I said, before you leave, let's see something. Everybody who's been affected by gun violence, has lost a loved one due to gun violence, raise your hand. And 10,000 people raised their hand, including him, including me. And then I said, okay, everybody that celebrated after that person was lost, keep your hands up. everybody dropped their hand. So we have to be careful in how we talk about murder and violence amongst our own people, because we'll end up celebrating our own murder.
That's right. That's right. They come right back on us. That's right.
Yeah. So that was a moment, you know, but it's challenging to get artists that's going to carry the message we're pushing and that's going to connect to the people that need the messaging. That's the tricky part. So I salute the artists that participated this year, because it kind of forced them to step out of their box a little bit and elevate their game a little bit and not be afraid to associate themselves with peace. And that was huge. So big shout out to everybody that participated in 24 Hours of Peace. Too Rare, G Herbo, Fabio Foreign, Fabulous, CL Smooth, everybody, all the local artists, big shout out to them, Mr. C, everybody, of course, the mayor, Mitty, everybody who came in and supported this year was phenomenal, and we just want to do bigger things and encourage peace, love, unity, safety, having fun. So it's not corny to talk about that. We'll get more artists with that messaging that can bring those numbers out like we want.
And that's what you mean by a cultural shift.
And let's give a shout out to our DJ Rhino, who's down in DC at the Congressional Black Caucus, who's working right now, who's doing the Black Party.
Yes, he is.
Culture.
Where are you?
Shout
You
out
not
to
down there?
Rhino.
Huh?
You not down there?
No.
Okay, because I know that's your thing, Donna. I know that's your thing.
That's my thing.
Can I ask a question?
Black Caucus.
Yeah.
But we're proud of DJ Rhino, man. He's playing for the congressman, the congressmen all over the country are rocking a DJ Rhino, as they should be.
And tomorrow, if anybody has a chance to get on that road, Congressman Danny Davis will be doing his brain trust on reentry and the amendments he has made to that legislation about the Reentry Act.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. And any other words before we close off? I just want to thank all of our guests.
Tomorrow, North Public Library, 1:00, James Brown African American Room, screening of Nation Time and an intergenerational dialogue as to why that's important 50 years later, with yours over here, Lawrence Hamm, Adimu Chunga, Karen Thompson, ACLU, Damon Ali, New Community Street Team, and Jasiah Muhammad from the Brick City Peace Collective. 1:00.
And that's at 1:00, you said?
1:00, New Public Library, James Brown African American Room.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Chairman Hamm, any
I'm spellbound listening to Hakeem. Hakeem, did you see this Instagram video by Professor Griff commenting on, I think he has a book, or maybe it's an album out or something, commenting on hip hop and how the shift happened with the, have you seen that? Do you put any credence in that?
I don't know if I saw that particular one, but is he talking about the meeting that
well, he didn't mention the meeting, but he mentioned how the record companies made a conscious decision, up to a certain point, Black people weren't making any songs about violence, about killing, about shooting. And then he said at a certain point, the record companies, made a decision that we're going to fund something else. And that video is like going around on it, because I saw it, and me, I'm way disconnected, but it popped up on my feed on Instagram and on Facebook.
So I have a personal experience, right? In 97, 98, somewhere around there, we took a meeting at Def Jam. We had left Capitol Records. We were looking for a new deal, went to Def Jam. We had some music with Carl Thomas, of course, who's on the album. He's a good friend of ours. We had a bunch of music with him, some other joints, some really, really dope stuff. Of course, I'm going to say that because it's my stuff, but it was fire. It was fire. So I sit down with Todd Moskowitz, who, an associate, had known him for some time, playing the music. Hot, tough. I love this. This is, I'm feeling this, but you guys just aren't street enough. You guys aren't, Todd Moskowitz told us we wasn't street enough. Therefore, we couldn't get signed to Def Jam. And it didn't make sense because Def Jam is, Public Enemy. Def Jam is LL Cool J. Def Jam is EPMD. But then
what the hell is Todd Moskowitz know about our damn street?
Murder Inc. It was Rock the Rock. It was drug dealer oriented music, the swagger, the energy, drug. Todd Moskowitz would leave. He would go to Violator for some time. Leave Violator. He would go on to create Asylum, which was really the launching pad for what we know of as trap music, 3 6 Mafia, that whole thing. That was Asylum. He would leave there. Now he's over at 300. We know 300 with Young Thug and all these murder cases in Atlanta. Their sign or the distribution deals are with 300. So I say all this to say that what happens is there's a certain type of white boy who has an image of black people in his mind. And in his mind, he will only get behind images that reinforce how he sees us. Those are the
this is a white boy. This is a white boy that's an executive at a record company.
Right. But those are all the white boys who are executives at record companies. They like the gangster type of Negro. They like the player, hustler, pimp. It's a little edgy, risque. It's the the white boys in the 40s and the jazz supplying the heroin to keep you da-da-da-da-da. It's always, you see who it is. It's always the white boy who got the resources and the money.
That's right.
So that dynamic never changes, and they keep us right there. So they
follow
keep
the money.
And I know this is great, but I know we are over time. And I mean, when it's Donna, I always tease you for asking the question that pushes us a little over, and then I was teasing Ed, and then I teased Donna again. But I think we got. I mean, it was a great question, Chairman Hamm. But we got to tease you about that too. In terms of just like that was a good question. But
you gonna learn. Don't ask me anything when you over time.
Right. I mean, my fault. Right? It was my bad. It was my bad. I mean, I wasn't saying nothing. Maybe an announcement, a meeting, right? I know something was going on in the community, and I was my bad.
I ain't wasting. I'm not doing announcements when I'm talking to Hakeem. Hakeem got too much to give for me to talk to him about activities.
I'm just sharing what I got from you, brother Hamm. I'm just sharing what I got from you, and of course, Baba Zaid.
But that's why we always really like having Newark's ambassador to hip hop on our show, right? Like we love having you here, man. We learn from you and appreciate you. We will we will be back again soon next week. I will thank our guests. Thank Gwen Moten for starting us off so powerfully.
Oh man, I'm still mad that we didn't even know all that, but she's been sitting amongst us for years. We just didn't know.
Right, and 59 years later, right? 59 years after the church bombings on 16th Street Baptist Church. Thanks, Dr. Kelly Harris, and of course, Chairman Lawrence Hamm. Thank you, Phyllis Jeffers-Colly, for all the work on trauma. That was excellent. We didn't get Councilman William Barbee on, so I know Donna, you pushed him on. He didn't show up for this, but hopefully we'll have him on. Soon. Okay. But thanks, Ron Pierce of the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice, and Philip Hensley from the League of Workers, because that was real interesting talking about the Bill of the Now.
And before Jonathan signs off, I just need everybody to stay on after the sign off for a brief announcement.
All right, cool. So we'll say talk to you later. We're ending the broadcast. Be careful, be safe, and see you next week.